Hi, I'm Rebecca Lieb.
And I'm Jason Horton.
And we're the hosts of Ghost Town, a comedy podcast about all places abandoned, tragic, mysterious, haunted, and true crimey.
That's not a word. We cover all kinds of locations like
the Los Feliz Murder House,
an LA murder frozen in time, Action Park,
the world's most dangerous amusement park, John Benet Ramsey's house, Woodstock 99, the Cecil Hotel, and the Black House.
Ooh, Satan. So pause the podcast you're currently listening to immediately and go subscribe to Ghost Town.
You can find us at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey.
Groovy.
Yeah,
groovy.
We've got another ad for you here. This time it's for us. We're here to remind you one last time. This is your last chance to answer our November question for our listener. It's our November. No, I was working past that.
I wasn't going to say question 3 times in a row.
I'm covering my tracks here.
Inquiry.
For our November episode, we're going to be taking a listener question we got and asking you, other listeners, to answer this question along with us, and that will be our episode for the November episode. So the question we have, it's from Jared Kolka. He emailed this to us. What do you like most about Angelenos? What should someone not from here be aware of to make their stay as agreeable as possible? This is your last chance, America.
You better have a better answer than me, because I have no answer.
Sometimes it's best just to say nothing at all.
Nothing at all.
I was trying to I wasn't going for The Simpsons. I was trying to leave it as
I am.
I'm auditioning for The Simpsons by reading quotes from The Simpsons. I was just going to leave it at saying nothing, and then we say nothing, and then the episode starts. But
I'll try it again.
Here we are about 20 seconds later, still in the ad.
Well, you know what I've learned? Nothing.
At all. At all.
At all.
At all.
At all.
Stupid Flanders. Okay.
Stupid sexy Flanders.
Here's the episode. At all. Well, it's 10 p.m. on Halloween night, and you know what that means. All the kids have gone to bed, and everyone's put their leftover candy out on their porch specifically for us, people in their 30s, the raccoons of humans.
Facing off against our mortal enemy, the raccoon. The raccoon of raccoons.
Well, here we go onto the porch of the house. The porch.
Stop talking like that.
You said I could be a narrator for Halloween. Remember? It was interior, apartment, dusk.
Shut up. Hey, where the hell's the candy?
It should be right here. The raccoons couldn't have gotten here already. There's no fecal matter. You know, from the anus.
Hey, I see something there through the window. Look.
Is it fecal matter?
No, it's a wooden box. That's probably where they keep our candy. Whose house is this?
The sign says the mortuaries.
Well, I mean, we can't just go in. As vampires, we need to be invited in, but more importantly, that's just plain rude.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll just never eat candy again. Thanks. Unless suddenly this door just... I'm torn.
Come on, let's go.
All right, I'm not torn anymore. Why are there jars of formaldehyde everywhere?
It keeps the candy fresh.
Why are there flowers on top of the candy box?
It keeps the candy fresh.
Well, why are...
What do I have to explain to you about fresh candy?
Greg, I think this is a casket.
A casket? No, you casket. All right, let's open the candy box.
Okay, it's pretty heavy though. We're gonna have to use all 12 hands. Oh, we're also 6-handed monsters.
Stop narrating.
Oh, God, what are we about to see?
You mean eat. Spring-loaded snakes! What the hell kind of treat or trick is this?
Well, maybe the candy's in this here drawer. More snakes!
Maybe they're keeping them fresh in the refrigerator. What? What is this? Less snakes, more snacks. Must be in the freezer then. I got snakes in my eyes. Turn the lights on.
I'll flip the switch.
Now there's a snake in my boot. Get the shoe off of me.
All right, I got it. Well, we knew that one was coming.
Let's get out of here. Give me the car keys.
Let me get him out of this here pocket.
I'm scared. Call 911.
Okay.
911, what's your...
I can't take it anymore. I'm going to drink this formaldehyde and kill myself. Now to unscrew the lid.
Stop narrating. No, let's get to the car.
Wait, maybe the candy's in this here Jack-in-the-Box. Needless to say, more snakes.
Keep running.
There's something stuck in the engine. What could that be?
I'll go check. Everything looks fine. There could be no wiper fluid. I'm gonna go check. Maybe there's candy in here, huh? My heart.
Greg, you're dying!
Before I die, I want you to have my most cherished item.
Is it valuable?
It's got sentimental value and financial value.
What is it? Where is it?
It's in my...
Oh, he fecaled. You're what, Greg? Is it in your lucky peanut brittle canister that you carry with you everywhere? No, not in there. Maybe it's in your jar of beer nuts. You never knew what those things were, but you always said they got you drunk, right, Greg? Rude. Well, time to open up these beer nuts. Nothing. Well, I may not find it today, but I swear, Greg, I will spend the rest of my life trying to find your most cherished item, because I need money.
And indeed he did. Daniel sought Greg's most cherished item until his dying day, which was 6 hours later, technically the next day. And it went a little something like this.
My heart.
For you see, my most cherished item was nothing tangible. It was in Daniel's heart all along. It was also snakes. Very tangible snakes.
Oh, hello.
Oh, nice to find you here again.
I swiveled in my chair
You did.
up to the microphone.
You did like a 30-degree angle. Like your knees are in the same place.
My neck is mostly cartilage. I can't move much. I thought it would add a bit of flair to these introductions.
Did it work?
Tune into our December episode.
This won't be addressed in November. We told you what November is going to be about. But December we might
But
talk about
December
it.
will be, does Daniel have flair? That's the big question. First of all, we need to say our names.
Hi, I'm Greg Gonzalez.
Hi, I'm Daniel Zaffron.
Welcome. To,
Wow.
Welcome to Los
Oh,
Angeles
golly.
Weekly.
We realized that we never say our names and people don't know who we are because it's all about cachet.
It's all about branding. It's
all-
all about Daniel's parents finally figuring out what he does.
It's all about those brands I put on all those people and that cult I made. So that's who we are.
Yeah.
I wonder if
we're
anyone.
brothers.
I wonder. Are we brothers? What'd you say? Are we brothers?
Let's go back a second.
I was just wondering if people know us by name or just by. Oh, that's LA.
Oh, that's that weird
That's LA
laugh.
Minkley. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's the guy that edits. I can hear him editing as he walks down the street.
That's that guy who does 3 weeks worth of research. I could smell it on him.
Anyway, what month is it? It's October.
Happy Halloween.
Das October. It's the month of Halloween. Before we get into that, let's talk about what we did last month.
Oh, right,
Greg.
right.
What did you do last month?
Me and my girlfriend went to the Echo Park Lake and we rode the swans, but at night.
You
we
can
rode,
do that?
Yeah, we rode night swans. They have a new thing where you...
You mean geese?
No, they were ducks.
The swans of the night.
gooses.
Black swans.
They line it with LED lights, the shape of the swan, and then you can go out there at night.
That sounds terrifying.
A little bit, because they're like, hey, don't get stuck in the weeds or the barriers, or we're going to have to go get you. I'm like, oh, I don't like that. And there's a lot of times where there's
Also, at night, they turn into real swans. Don't feed them.
It's weird because we would turn and there's that big fountain at Echo Park Lake, and we're like, well, we don't want to get wet because that's gross. Like in high school, we used to run the lake because we didn't have a field or anything because it's a small school in downtown. So
Your school would take you to the lake?
Mm-hmm. So we'd run laps around the Echo Park Lake. Okay. And there's a part near Glendale Boulevard and Bellevue where like it's really wide and then it gets really narrow all of a sudden. And somebody in that transition fell into the lake and they came out and they were just like brown sludge, just covered in brown sludge. And they made them walk back to school.
He came out like the T-1000 freezing.
Yeah, they made him walk back to school. So I'm relaying this message as our swan is drifting into the fountain.
And it happened right here on a night just like this.
So we start pedaling, right? Like really, really hard to get away from it. And we're pedaling for a good like 3 to 4 minutes. We're like, we're safe now. And we turn and we're even closer to the fountain. And there was a lot of near misses because like you get like...
How many people are on these swans at night?
There was a good like 10 or 11 out there with us. It's pretty nice though. It was very romantic. You had downtown.
Was it exhausting? It's paddling. I hate that because I've done that at Balboa Park during the day. It's not. It might have been no, it wasn't. I don't think I was in a swan.
It's like a dragon or something. It was like a beaver.
It was a paddle kraken. It's exhausting.
Yeah,
like it's really
It's a workout.
No. It's exhausting. It's not a little tired.
Well, I'm pretty ripped, so we were like shaped
I'm ripped in
differently.
the legs.
Yeah, ripped in the legs.
Touched in the head, ripped in the legs. Especially in that sludgy water.
Yeah. You're mostly just paddling through trash.
Was it expensive?
It was like $11 for an hour per person. Worth it if you're looking for a date. And you'd be like, so what do you know about Natalie Wood? And then the girl could be like, oh, crap, I did it again, didn't I? I'm dating a guy who's obsessed with Robert Wagner.
Here I am. I found myself on a boat with someone who knows the full story of Natalie Wood yet again.
I've done it once again.
And here I go, having to kill Diesel, Robert Wagner, and Christopher Walken one more time.
One more time.
Well, you know what my thing of the month is?
What?
Well, you might know because you printed out my papers for me, and I'm sure you looked at all these juicy bits.
I read it. I had no idea what you meant, though.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to explain. What we've taken to doing, because we were in like Valley Village or something, and there was a John's supermarket.
Ugh.
Well, we're never near a John's.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't even know there's a Ralph's. I just know Gelson's.
Occasionally, I'll step into a Whole Foods just to
See what the people are like, but for my everyday,
to have them kiss the ring as I walk around.
for my staples, I go to Bristol Farms. But we're like, let's go see what John's is all about. So we went in there, and Valley Village is like a Russian sort of area. Yeah. So it was tailored like to Russian people. Right. So there was like all these breads and cheeses and meats and like halva and all these desserts and stuff. Then it sort of became, because then we were in Glendale a few days later. We were like, there's a John's. Let's go see what the Glendale John's is like. So we went in there, and it's all this Armenian meats and breads and cheeses. And then, but even like Ralph's and stuff like that is kind of the same way. Like in the Ralph's in my neighborhood, there's a lot of Jewish people. So there's a huge kosher section.
Highland Park has something similar to that too, where it's mostly like Latino.
Yeah, it tailors to the community of what they like. That's my thing of the month is the tailored grocery selections for different neighborhoods with different communities. I
like that.
It's fun. Yeah. It's a lot of fun because you can get all these desserts that you can't get at other places or wouldn't know existed at other places.
Right.
I got a pound of halva at the John's in Valley Village. It was great.
You're taking it away from that community, and they need that.
Halva's mine now, and I'm going to start selling it at Bristol Farms.
Start making my own.
I'm going to small batch my own halva. I'm bringing it all the way north from Valley Village to Sherman Oaks, or south, I guess. Feels like north because we're above them. That's my thing of the month. I love even like Super King markets or Vallarta supermarkets that have a specialized selection.
Right.
I enjoy being
You're potlucking yourself.
Yeah.
You're making your own potluck. I'm like, I'm going to have an horchata, and I'm going to have
Israeli horchata also.
Which turns out the same thing. They don't know it, though. Don't tell them that they're making the same thing.
But yeah, that's my thing of the month. It's fun to do. And now that's become our new thing. If we're in a different neighborhood and there's a John's, I'm going in that John's.
What a fun date you are. Let's go to the market.
You don't like walking around John's?
I think the thing with John's with me is I thought it would be cheaper because I'm like, well, Vaughn's is expensive, but John's, and it's like, it's the same thing.
Price wise, I also know that Korean markets. That's another thing. But
and then here's another thing about Korean markets.
And India Sweets and Spices. Yeah, that was the thing. Like, so Vaughn's isn't related to John's. This is a Breyers Dryers thing.
It is
all over again.
Oh, here he goes.
Working as material. This is what I've been leading up to. You ever notice? No, you got to pay to hear that joke. $10 on Patreon, and I'll tell you that joke. I'll tell you one joke a month if you give me $10 on Patreon. Anyway, so that was September for us. So now we're in October. It's Halloween time, so it's not our scary episode, but it's our Halloween spooky adjacent relation. Spooky adjacent relation. What did I say?
I didn't know that you rhymed on cue. Is that also a Patreon tier?
$20 a month, and I'll rap for you once a month. I'll make one rhyme for you a month.
John's Vaughn's.
Breyers Dryers. There's your first 2 months free. $20, I'll get you more. Yeah, it's spooky adjacent this month. Yeah. So we decided, why don't we cover graveyards?
Rap.
Graveyards.
Boneyards.
Did you say rap? Well, this is a story all about John's.
Oh my God.
My life got turned upside Bonds. What? Yeah, we're going to be talking about graveyards. Yeah. Some of the bigger. We covered the two biggest in the city, and then I have one other smaller one. We'll get into it of like all of the stories that we've talked about before, like all the people. Like this is where they end up.
Yeah, for sure.
It doesn't matter who you are. You're going to end up in one of these places.
Build a whole paragraph of everyone we talked to that ended up at mine, and I'm like, don't even put the energy into remember.
At the end, I have a thing of like, these are all the famous people, and these are all the people we've talked about that are here.
It's just going to be hyperlinks, and then you want to hit episode 13 to
click on this grave. Let's get it.
Yeah, get it going.
Here's a new rap for me. Let's get it started in here.
Push it real good.
That was scary, but now something not scary. A graveyard. Let's get going on my first one. You ready for this?
Y'all ready for this?
Here's a new rap. They say die in battle, live forever in Valhalla. But die as a character actor, be buried forever in Valhalla Memorial Park. Because that's where we're going first. Valhalla Memorial Park.
I've never heard of this memorial park before.
You've heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard of
this one. It's like a third of Burbank. Oh, no, it's Costco. Never mind. So this huge human dumping ground sitting on top of Burbank and North Hollywood started not there, but rather in an office building downtown by two shady people doing multiple shady things. Do you really not know where this place is? No. It's, if you go...
Do you really not know? Yeah, I don't know.
Are you really that stupid?
Yeah, and you host this podcast with me, right?
And you claim to be someone who frequents graveyards? A ghoul grabber, as you call? There's a rhyme for you. Well, that's not a rhyme. That's just two things that start with G.
Yeah, that's the letter.
$50 a month.
Greg Gonzalez.
It's like right next to the airport, but if you're at like where the Costco is, if you keep going down, what is that street that heads...
Victory or Burbank?
I think Victory, the one that heads...
That goes under by the dog shelter and the gun place and then comes back up.
No, not that one. It's that crazy intersection where the Costco's there and it shoots off in like 5 directions.
It's Burbank and then another street to the right.
It's that other street to the right. It's the
it
one that heads west, deeper into the valley. I don't know. But if you keep going down that and you are getting to the North Hollywood Burbank border, that's it. It's a big cemetery.
I think I know what you're talking about now. I think when I was huge rain store.
When you were at the what?
There was a huge rainstorm like 3 years ago.
I thought you said I was at that huge meringue store.
I'm glad that you heard that.
So anyway, this place, it was started by 2 financiers.
Oh no, that's bad.
John R. Osborne and C.C. Fitzpatrick. That's C.C., not C.C. See? There's a rhyme!
You're going to need to subscribe to my Patreon if you want more rhymes. Do you want my Venmo right now?
Do you say meringue store? In March 1923, these 2 hucksters, they started the Osborne Fitzpatrick Company in the Pacific Mutual building downtown and decided to get into the graveyard business with that company. So that same year, they bought 63 acres of land in Burbank at what is now 10621 Victory Boulevard. But it was then just that big open field next to the other big open field that they didn't put dead people in. And they just...
Dead people this one. No dead people in this
weeds
one.
Here. The future goes here. They decided to name it Valhalla Memorial Park. So the problem was that far north in the city, it was nearly impossible to get to at the time. At the time. Kind of still now. Even if they had paved roads, which they didn't. So nobody was buying plots in their cemetery.
Right.
And this is when these 2 fraudsters showed the world just how fraudy they were. This is what they did. They hired hundreds of salesmen to sell plots in their cemetery, but their marketing tactic was to stress to people that the population of Los Angeles is going up and up, and a lot of these people are coming to the city for health reasons, and that means they're going to die soon because of these health reasons. So because of that, burial plots are going to start becoming scarce in the city, and the prices are going to go way up for them.
Where are you going to bury them? Anywhere else?
Where are you going to bury them? In all this empty space? Good luck getting a permit for that, because we don't have one. They were telling people that people were already being buried one on top of the other in the city, and in 8 years, there won't be any space left in the entire city for new burials. This was 1923. They were right.
Yep.
There's going to be a Costco over there. Keep going east, and you'll hit the Costco. There was no shortage for burial space, especially not back then, but they wanted to scare people into buying space in the cemetery or try to convince them that it was a good investment that they could resell for profit. So they especially targeted old people who were not only close to needing a plot in a cemetery, but also vulnerable to being manipulated.
Yeah.
But what? Old people. What can you do?
Oh my
Parents.
God.
But what's even worse than these scare tactics was that they weren't just selling burial plots to people under false pretenses. They were selling the same burial plot to people under false pretenses.
Whoa.
So they would sell the same plot in the cemetery multiple times to different people, sometimes as many as 16 times. It was like the producers.
Yeah. We're going to turn you all into smoothies. So yeah, we can sell one spot. Yeah, we're just going to pour you in.
Osborne and Fitzpatrick made somewhere between $2 and $3 million doing this. And any salesman who questioned their tactics were either lied to or fired. But you can't fool soon-to-be dead people forever. In early 1924, people who had bought plots started looking closer at what they bought. And not only did they find that they were double booked, some people's plots turned out to be outside of the cemetery or in the middle of the lake. Where the swans go.
Yeah, we're going to throw you in the lake.
She'll just be floating there.
Yeah, I know it's in some lady's apartment and you don't know her, but that's where you're going to end up and you need to pay money.
Even then, you'll have to have a roommate in death.
Yeah.
So they started banding together and got organized, and in June 1924, the federal government launched an official investigation of Valhalla Memorial Park in Burbank. All the lies were brought to light, and Osborne was forced to admit that he had no previous graveyard experience.
I've seen one.
I went to a funeral once. I could run this. One of the sales guys guys, was accused by an attorney of trimming an old lady of her life savings. So he punched him and said, "I've never trimmed anyone in my life." In December...
Old terms are great.
I know. He was a barber also. In December 1924, Osborne and Fitzpatrick were found guilty of 10 charges of mail fraud and were each fined $12,000 and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Before they started their sentence, Osborne hired a personal valet named Jack Gordon, and when they were staying at the Maryland Hotel in Pasadena, Osborne went into the bathroom. When he came out, Gordon was gone along with $100,000 worth of Osborne's money. It turned out Gordon's real name was Harold J. Whitaker, who was a wanted man in several states across the country. In January 26, he got arrested finally and sent back to LA and put in the county jail, only to break out 3 months later.
Wow.
But back to Osborne and Fitzpatrick themselves. They had tried appealing their case to the Supreme Court, but they would not hear it. So in June 1927, the two were sent to Leavenworth Federal Prison in Kansas. While they were in jail, it just keeps on coming for this guy. Osborne's dad, John E. Osborne, took over Valhalla and took no salary and tried to make right his son's wrongs.
Yeah.
But even from behind bars, Osborne kept screwing everything up. While he was in jail, he became friends with a former USC football player named George Meadows, aka Malicious Meadows. There's a rhyme. Man, that's just 2 letters again.
God darn it. It's alliterative.
O.J. Simpson was UCLA.
No, he was
USC?
Yeah.
Well, this would have been a good name for him. Malicious Meadows was in there for selling stolen Liberty bonds, and Osborne told Meadows all about his cemetery and how his dad was an honest man now trying to run it. So, of course, when Meadows got released, he went straight to Valhalla and tried to get his dad to help him with a Japanese colonization scheme in Mexico. No idea.
No idea.
But
I bet it's malicious.
it sounds Meadowy. Osborne Sr., being the honest man he was, he said no. Then Meadows said, "Well, I know of a lot of powerful people in the law, and I could get your son released early if you have the money for it." He even said that he had already met with President Calvin Coolidge to get his son released. Honest though he was, Osborne Sr. was also dumb. So he paid Meadows $23,000, who made off with the money only to be convicted on August 17, 1929, sent back to prison. In 1930...
You can always call Calvin Coolidge to get you out. Oh, no. Hello, Callie, it's me, Malicious Meadows.
Malicious Meadows here for Calvin Coolidge. I'm president of the Alliteration Club. Yeah, that's me.
President the President.
President to President phone call. Hello. In 1930, Osborne and Fitzpatrick were released after serving only 5 years. And the good old dad, he gave them both their jobs back at Valhalla, which...
Honest, but dumb.
This did not sit well with anybody who owned plots in the cemetery. So what followed were a series of lawsuits where people were suing to not have these 2 kids back in charge, and the kids were suing them for slander. We served our time. We're not going to do it
What are you basing your judgments on? A pattern of behavior based on us?
It's your word against ours. This all culminated in September 1935 when Osborne Sr. shot himself in the garage.
Wow.
And the state forced the kids to sell the cemetery. Osborne Jr. went on to be a bookie who then exposed a corrupt cop gambling ring that was headquartered at Santa Monica and La Brea in 1961.
Okay. I bet it was not heroic. I bet he's like,
I'll talk and I'll walk, right? There's a rhyme. But back at the cemetery, it was a full 15 years from the state. Yeah, before it got its name that we know it by today. And that name, Pierce Brothers. Pierce Brothers Valhalla Memorial Park is what it's known as today. But who were the Pierce Brothers? Dumb question. You should be asking, who were the Pierce Brothers brothers? In 1880, William Pierce, who is a descendant of President Franklin Pierce, came to LA from upstate New York and bought a farm where the USC hospital now is.
Okay.
That's where O.J. Simpson...
He buys gloves there.
The gloves all fit. You must have quit. There's another rhyme. Then in 1881, his brother Fred Pierce came, and the two opened a stable at Alameda and 16th, moving people and cargo around the city using the livestock from their farm. So they were very successful, but they started realizing that some of their most lucrative work involved transporting dead people to graveyards, because at that time there were 2 undertakers in the city, so they could charge a lot. So they decided, let's become undertakers 3 and 4. So now the Pierce brothers are undertakers. Okay. They became so successful, they decided to take the undertaker business one step further, one step earlier and later, and started running their own ambulances to get dead people and an insurance company to insure dead people.
Do you know where I thought you were going with this?
Grave
they
diggers?
started killing people and then burying burying them.
Business is slow. What's that future USC football player doing? Malicious Meadows? No, the more malicious one. But here's the thing. There's 2 Pierce brothers. They kept the brothers coming. In all, there were 8 Pierce brothers running this business at different points, including one who became one of the few doctors in town and ended up he was delivering half the babies in the city, one of the Pierce brothers. There was also Clarence, who in 1947 founded an agricultural college in Woodland Hills that he named after himself.
Kidding.
Pierce College.
You're kidding.
That blew my mind. It was crazy.
That's cool because I'll bury dead bodies at Pierce College all the time.
So cool. I've left so many in the ground there. What? Good thing I was on that football team at Pierce. What? In 1902, the brothers upgraded their operations and moved to 8th and Flower with a full-on mortuary and chapel attached. But in 1924, they moved to their landmark location at 720 West Washington Boulevard, which is the first full-service funeral home in the city. To illustrate to you how much importance was placed here, it was designed by the same people who did the Chinese Theater, Culver Studios, and the Alex Theater in Glendale.
You know, it looks like it.
Did you get your ticket at the box office? You could get everything you needed done for your dead loved ones there, just short of burying them, which they had a trolley service running from them directly to cemeteries, complete with a dedicated funeral car. So they were where you wanted to go. It was a ritzy place. And to try to dispel the stigma people had of mortuaries, they regularly gave tours to the public to show them that it wasn't a scary place. Yeah. Don't be afraid.
For the purposes of an October episode, we needed to kind of be scary. So if you could scratch that out.
You might actually accidentally touch a scalpel.
Yeah,
there's a spider in the corner.
We saw a bat once.
We accidentally put a bat in somebody. They were saying, don't be afraid of this place, especially if you want to do your business here. Come to us.
Well, that's neat.
Its reputation was so well known that in 1935, Tallulah Bankhead and a bunch of her friends got drunk and went down there in the middle of the night demanding a tour of the mortuary.
Wow.
Tallulah Bankhead.
Love her.
Another time, supposedly Errol Flynn stole John Barrymore's corpse from the mortuary and took it to the Beverly Hills Hotel, but they claim that never happened.
I don't know Errol Flynn enough to know if that is his kind of thing, but that's so funny. If that happened, and he weekend at Bernie did.
I think I don't know if he was like, I'm going to the Oscars with John Barrymore if it's the last thing I do. I think it was like, he was like, I wanted him to be at his own wake. So the story was that he brought him to his own wake and like put him in a chair and
put sunglasses on him. What's that, John? Oh, John.
So what was it like being in, I can't think of a single John Barrymore movie. Yeah. What was it like giving birth to Drew?
No, to Drew's mom.
So what did happen though, this is a sad story, was one lady whose body went there, she left all her money to her 30 cats and to pay for an orchestra to play for 3 nights while all her family and friends could come visit her corpse. Nobody came. Nobody came any of those 3 nights or to her funeral.
Where were the cats? What happened?
They were at the Beverly Hills Hotel for John Barrymore's wake. This place is still there, but it's mostly boarded up. It's been a LA historic landmark since 1993. Throughout the 40s, the Pierce brothers started buying up smaller mortuaries around town. They even bought W.A. Brown and Son, who claimed to have the largest casket display in the world. So they were running 21 funeral homes and a crematorium, but in 1950, they added the last piece of their monopoly puzzle and bought the still for sale Valhalla Memorial Park, renaming it Pierce Brothers Valhalla Memorial Park. There aren't too many celebrities buried here that are people that we know. Most of them are people you've probably seen. They should just put headshots on all of these things because you've probably seen these people in like every TV show from the 50s and 60s.
The entire cast of Andy Griffith that isn't Andy Griffith or Don Knotts.
All of Mayberry is there.
Floyd the barber.
You step on a thing and they come out of the grave. Oh, I remember him. So a few of the standouts, I can't believe it. Annetta Corsout, aka Helen Crump from Andy Griffith.
Really?
Yeah, she's buried there. Cliff Edwards, who's the voice of Jiminy Cricket.
Okay.
Bud Westmore.
I know that name.
Look up Bud Westmore. And we're back. Who's Bud Westmore? I think he might be a makeup guy, actually.
Oh, because they just did a giant... Dana Gould just did a big episode about how he's a fraud and...
oh, really? Well, egg on my face.
Millicent Patrick was the real designer of Creature of Black Lagoon. But
yeah, that's a whole thing right now.
Yeah. It's a real thing right now.
Just now. Also, there's the wrestler Gorgeous George.
Really?
Yeah. A couple of our previous episode subjects, Slapsy Maxie Rosenblum.
He's at Valhalla?
He's at Valhalla. And of course, the amazing Criswell is also buried there by a landslide. The top celebrity there, and really anywhere he would be close to the top. Oliver Hardy is buried in Valhalla.
Really?
Yeah.
That's the top dog, yeah.
And he is top because he's buried with 16 other people. The most iconic part of the cemetery, however, is what is now known as the Portal of the Folded Wings. I'm sure you've seen pictures of this. It was designed by Kenneth MacDonald Jr. and Federico Giorgi, who is the same guy who did all those giant elephants and lions in the movie Intolerance, which are now the things in Hollywood and Highland complex. I wonder if there will ever be a disorder known as the Hollywood and Highland complex.
You dress up as a superhero.
Yeah, that would, if you can't stop dressing up as a superhero, a dirty superhero. You've got Hollywood and Highland Complex.
Asking for $2 every time you take a picture with somebody that you love.
Oh, I'm sorry, but he has Hollywood and Highland Complex. Not the Elephants, by Federico Giorgi. So it was dedicated March 1st, 1925, and it was the original entrance to the cemetery. I know you've seen pictures of it. Yeah. It kind of looks like, you know how the stuff in Balboa Park in San Diego looks, where it's like kind of Spanish revival.
Right.
It kind of looks like a dome of that.
Okay.
I'm sure you've seen it. Have I said that already? So you would drive through this thing to get inside. You would drive under it. It's 78 feet tall, and until the 40s, it was the tallest thing in Burbank.
It's like 9 feet tall. They're like, whoa.
Dude, oh my God.
Skyscraper? What's a skyscraper?
Supposedly, pilots would use it as a signpost to where the Burbank airport was because it was right next to it. It was the only really beautiful part of the cemetery. So in the 20s and 30s, they'd use it to hold concerts and do radio broadcasts from. Eventually, as the landscape of Burbank changed, the entrance to the cemetery moved onto a more convenient street. So the portal lost its purpose, but it was so nice that they wanted to do something with it. So they realized the airport's right here. Burbank has a lot of aviation history. Let's just make it a monument to aviation now.
That's fair.
It's the portal of the folded wings, and I know it's an aviation thing, and I look at it, I'm like, I kind of see the airplanes. There's nothing airplane about it. It was designed way before the airplane. On December 17th, 1953, which was the 50th anniversary of powered flight, was that day. It was rededicated as the portal of the folded wings shrine to aviation.
I bet there was somebody's like, now it's about planes, and people are like, yay.
It was dedicated in honor of the pioneers of flight. In the opening ceremony, there were all these pioneers there. One of the people is the guy who built the motor for the Wright brothers plane. Was at the ceremony for this thing, sitting in Burbank, going like, yeah, I kind of get it.
Yeah, I kind of get it.
Where's Oliver Hardy buried?
Where's Helen Crump's grave?
Where's that lady from that show that just came out's grave? Since then, it's grown to have a replica of the Columbia Space Shuttle in front of it. It also has a museum inside that's occasionally open, apparently. On July 18th, 1969, the craziest thing to ever happened to it when a small plane took off from Burbank Airport and crashed into it.
Oh my.
Killed 2 people.
Oh.
Crashed into a portal of aviation in a graveyard. This thing is now on their National Register of Historic Places, so it's national treasure, sort of, that you've never seen. The Pierce brothers' time at this place, though, at the cemetery, they didn't even last a decade when they sold it in 1959 to a guy named Joe Albritton, who sold off 20 acres of it to developers. They haven't owned that place in 60 years, but it still keeps the name Pierce Brothers. But that same year that they sold it, they went and bought the Westwood Village Memorial Park, which has a ton of celebrities in it. We'll get to that never. After this, kind of the biggest thing to happen was in 1971, they merged with the cemetery that had been next door since 1928, Blessed Hope Memorial Park, which was the official cemetery of Amy Semple McPherson.
Really?
It was a small 14-acre thing, but it was for members of the Foursquare Gospel Church only, with a big crypt in the middle that was meant to house McPherson when she died, and the closer that you were to her, the more it would cost you. So plots there were sold in the lobby of her church with the slogan, "Go up with Amy." It was a disaster, and she lost a ton of money on it, which is why she's actually buried in the next place I'm going to be talking about. Here's a weird thing. In the early 80s, they put in a vault that housed 16,500 aborted fetuses that were found in the home of a former medical lab person in Woodland Hills. He took home aborted fetuses.
Wow.
And they found it. It was a whole controversy. It was a whole political thing. And they're like, we'll take them in. And people are like, don't bury those things.
Don't bury them. We'll keep them in a safety deposit box.
See, talk about overselling a plot. Try sharing it with 16,499 others. So let's finish this up. 1991, they were bought by Service Corps International. That is where I lay this story to the end. So that's Valhalla.
That's very interesting. A lot of...
Yeah, when I was going into it, I was like, well, there's not as many famous people as I thought. What's going to be interesting? And I was like, oh, it was founded by criminals. And
well, that story has a lot of similarities to my cemetery. I'm going to be talking about Hollywood Forever Cemetery, right there, smack dab in Hollywood. All right, to start us off, let's rattle off some of the famous folks who are remembered at Hollywood.
So you're going into it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I want to give you a little teaser because I didn't know how to fit it in later. First off,
I'm not a good enough writer.
My, what? What was that last part? First off, Mila Nurmi, or as we all know her, Vampira, is buried there. Right behind her, the actor who played Kolchak the Night Stalker, Darren McGavin.
Always trying to find her till the very end.
Mm-hmm.
Almost got her.
Johnny Ramone has a beautiful statue of him.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Beautiful statue sits on top of his tombstone. It's such a nice statue, it makes you forget that I don't like Johnny Ramone. More of a Joey boy. Toto the dog is memorialized there.
That's true, but we know where he's really buried.
Yeah. No. Mount Blanc, the man of 1,000 voices, most of which you've heard in Looney Tunes. He's buried there. Alfalfa himself, Carl Switzer, is buried there.
Is that the one who got killed?
Look up that guy's death if you want to hear the most quintessential child actor story.
Yeah, that we'll cover in another episode.
Won't we? Florence Lawrence, which is a great name. And it's also the first official movie star of Hollywood.
That's kind of a rhyme.
Yeah, no, it's for sure, right?
The first Hollywood.
That's what that in an article.
That's what his tombstone says.
Or hers.
A woman movie star.
Oh, that was Florence Lawrence.
What is this? The other offensive thing I said before? I don't even remember.
Hubba Hubba Jane Mansfield is there. Don Adams of Get Smart is there.
These are sad stories.
Yeah, Marion Davies is in a mausoleum. You'll find Tyrone Power. Nelson Eddy is there. Douglas Fairbanks has a sarcophagus in front of a large white wall along the 120-foot long reflecting pool, which is called the Fairbanks. Mickey Rooney is there because he died once. Peter Lorre is there. Rudolph Valentino is famously there, and he is stalked by the woman in black. John Huston is kept there. Lana Clarkson, who was murdered by Phil Spector, rests at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Elmo Lincoln, the first Tarzan, rests there. Bugsy Siegel, the gangster who almost killed Goebbels, is there.
Really?
Yeah. Bob Guccione, the founder of Penthouse, is there. Golden Girl Estelle Getty is there. Judy Garland was moved there from New York recently. Paul Mooney, the gangster actor, is there. Anton Yelchin, Tony Scott, Chris Cornell, and amongst them, regular folk of a wide assortment of cultural and ethnic backgrounds so closely buried to one another, it's as if the stars of today and yesterday were simple people too.
Celebrities, they die just like us.
Their bones are just like ours, except for Judy Garland's. They sparkle.
They're all red and twinkly. We don't know what was wrong with her.
This is the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. My story is called Don't Hit the Peacocks with Your Car. I've almost
or
I use a lot of different sources and web pages for this.
Those are the peacocks.
I never almost hit a peacock there, but when I was at the Arboretum, I didn't go in. Arboretum, whatever.
The Beretta?
Dude, I've pronounced that so many different ways and been corrected in so many different ways. The Arbitrarium?
The Arbitrarium?
I've never been so mad at a peacock because I'm like, I know you're beautiful. You're in the parking space. There's only one left. Get out. For my research, I use like a lot of different sources and web pages for research, but the bulk of it comes from Hollywood Forever Cemetery, The Unauthorized Guide by Mark Masick. I got an article from Talent Magazine by Jacob Silverman. The title is a spoiler, so I don't want to say it. The Homestead Museum blog has a really great thing. Spoiler titles for that one too, but it was written by Paul Spitzeri. So anybody needs my sources, I have them, all right?
We don't.
Some people might.
People aren't going to call us out like all those other podcasts you're afraid of.
Hey, listen, Crime Junkies is going down hard, and that won't happen to me.
You have to be high up to go down hard. We can stumble.
Yeah, we can get tripped. Hollywood Forever Cemetery was once, long ago, known as Hollywood Memorial Park Cemetery and was originally opened in 1899. It was and still is on Santa Monica Boulevard between Gower and Van Ness. Originally, it covered 100 acres, but as we'll learn, it's not anymore. It was originally developed by two Isaacs, Isaac Van Nuys and Isaac Lancashire. And you were there, Isaac Sepulveda, and Isaac Rinaldi, and Isaac Canoga, and Isaac Ventura. You were all there. These are all street names in the valley for anyone who doesn't know. That's the joke there. Way back in 1869, Isaac Lancashire bought a pretty big portion of Mission San Fernando from Andres Pico for $115,000.
Are you trying to tell me that this story starts in the valley?
The two men got famous for their work in the valley, obviously. You think I like to start in the San Fernando Valley? I mean,
we all start in the San Fernando Valley. We were all born there, weren't we? Were we all born in Woodland Hills, Kaiser?
The cesspool, okay, is in San Fernando Valley. We all came from it.
The primordial goop. We all crawled out of it, right?
Right. Greg, say right. Okay, so he bought a large part of the southern valley from Andres Pico for $115,000. He quickly filled that land with sheep. It said up to 40,000 sheep, which is
peacocks of the
1800s. 40,000 sheep, which is certainly more sheep than I have. I only have the two. Later, with his son John and his son-in-law Isaac Newton Van Nuys, they formed the San Fernando Farm Association, and together these men cultivate about 60,000 acres of wheat in parts of the San Fernando Valley in the 1870s and 1880s during what was described in my Los Angeles encyclopedia as a wheat raising craze.
We were all doing it. Dancing the wheat chaff. Let's harvest again like we did last harvest season.
No. These men are...
I have bursitis.
These men are a few of the early fathers of the San Fernando Valley. Lancashire Boulevard obviously runs through North Hollywood, and Van Nuys is...
I think you could take it up to Valhalla.
You probably could. You're right.
You take it up to Valhalla.
Yeah, you take that up with Valhalla.
I'm surprised you didn't make a single Thor reference that whole time I was telling that story. I know you love that guy.
Isn't that Hitler's bunker, or was that the Eagle's Nest? Wasn't it Valhalla?
The Eagle's Nest was his like castle thing on the mountaintop. Maybe Valhalla was his bunker. Did he have a name for the bunker? I mean, it was kind of a secret bunker.
Secret Valhalla. I was trying to make a Nazi joke the whole time and I couldn't remember, so I was sitting there
should have stuck with Thor. You know him better.
He's been through a lot. Okay.
You know you were in the Thor youth.
You're funny.
It's a Thor subject.
No, wow.
That's $70 on Patreon.
You're going to have to Venmo me right now before you continue.
That one cannot go on without money in my Venmo account.
Lancashire runs through most of the valley from like one edge to the other, basically.
Yeah, it's one of those.
And Van Nuys is one of those areas where I don't like to park my car. Sales from
Great Johns, though.
Sales from agriculture and also other land holdings during one of the first population booms the city saw meant that the men were on the wealthier side of society. Even though the 1890s there was, I read something saying in the 1890s there was around 1,200 squatters on the company's land and it drove down stocks, which is pretty funny. But despite this, they were still pretty wealthy. So the Isaacs are buying lands and developing them, and they buy a plot of land in Hollywood on Santa Monica Boulevard and set it aside as a memorial park. The 100 acres the Isaacs bought was also a wheat field, which goes
What
to
year was this?
1899. So the 100 acres the Isaacs bought was also a wheat field, which goes to show you wheat raising craze. Also, the early days of Los Angeles was just like settlers of Catan for rich white people. Like, you have wheat, I'll buy wheat. I don't know how to play. I assume that's how you play.
It's all about wheat.
Yeah. Anyways, they buy the acreage from John.
Wheat, don't tell me. $80.
$80. Give me right now.
That's what everyone would listen to back then.
They had to go around in a trolley and
They're pea pods.
that's the sound of them cranking a what is it called?
You're doing one thing. I'm talking about pea podcast.
Oh my god. John Truman Gower. Heard of him? They bought the acreage from him. A last name you might recognize because the street that runs through Hollywood and along the acreage is Gower.
Gower Gulch.
Gower Gulch, where all the cowboy actors hang out. When he came to Los Angeles in 1869, he took up a government claim for 160 acres that would later become parts of South Hollywood. The Isaacs bought this land in 1899, but the park wouldn't open officially in 1901, where the first burial of the park took place in April of that year for Mrs. T.W. Price.
What movie was she in?
What bit part did she play? And Andy Griffith. Mrs. Apple Pison. I couldn't find much online about the early running years of Hollywood Memorial Cemetery, but the next step in the history of Hollywood Memorial comes during the next population boom in the 1920s, when 40 acres of the southern portion of the cemetery were sold to RKO Studios, which still stands today as Paramount Studios.
Yeah, it's so weird that, well, here's the edge of the cemetery, and they're filming Mission Impossible right there.
Yeah, you might see Tom Cruise climb inside of the building.
Yeah, he's going to rappel into an open grave.
I'll get into it, but it's a very Hollywood cemetery.
Yeah.
Around this time...
Forever. And it forever will be. Oh, I meant to say that at the end of your story. Go on.
Save it. Around this time, a section of the park was established as a sister cemetery on the same grounds, which was the only Jewish burial ground in the Hollywood at the time, the Beth Olam Cemetery. It was created to accommodate traditional Jewish burials. Later, mausoleums were added: the Hall of Solomon, the Hall of David, and the Garden of David.
That's right. You were asking me about Jewish burials the other day.
I'm like, hey, if I bury you right now, what
are we going to need?
We're going to wash you. We're going to leave you for a couple of days. We're not going to put any
pork
chemicals
in your veins.
Yeah, we're not going to cleanse your body with pork or any formaldehyde.
Can we at least put the traditional Catholic shellfish in your ears? Can we not put shrimp around your nose?
You want to keep going?
Can we not put hamburgers on one foot and cheese on the other foot?
Can we not put Groucho Marx glasses on you when you're buried?
Well, that you can do. That's the one thing you can do.
It's a little extra, but you can do it.
Instead of putting pennies on your eyes, you put Groucho Marx glasses on. Welcome to Judaism.
Virginia Rapp. Okay, so we're going to cover some...
Did someone say Rapp? My Virginia Rapp? Who's she?
We're going to cover some of the famous people that died in this era. Virginia Rapp, the victim of a sexual assault allegedly at the hands of Fetty Arbuckle,
oh, yikes.
was buried there in 1921 after the insane events of a Labor Day party where she died. It's a little too gruesome to cover here, but we'll save it for another time when it is appropriate somehow.
Probably the same episode as Alfalfa.
William Taylor Desmond, an actor and director who was mysteriously murdered, was interred here as well in 1922. Also buried there in 1919 was our old crazy pal Griffith J. Griffith, and Grumpy himself, Harrison Gray Otis, is buried at Hollywood Memorial.
So that's where they went. Because I was like, I have these guys where I'll trade you.
You want to trade?
I'll trade you William Wrigley Jr. for William Mulholland.
Bad trade. Yeah, 1926 is when Rudolph Valentino gets there. He seems to be the star of Hollywood forever.
Yeah, it's weird.
I think because of the woman in black.
Yeah.
It must have really.
I mean, it's still like him.
It's clearly the vampire. The place where I buy Gold Leaf is across the street, and I had just the night before watched Kolchak the Night Stalker, so I wanted to visit Darren McGavin and also say hi to Vampire, and they're right next to each other. And so I cross the street, and I'm walking over, and there's just a sad girl taking pictures of herself in front of Vampira's plot. I'm like, I'll give it 10 minutes. I'm gonna walk around. 10 minutes later, she's still there.
Hollywood. Vampire, you're not smiling.
Vampire, answer me. The 20s and 30s, the cemetery became a burial place for a multicultural community of Los Angeles with a heavy concentration of Russian Jewish people.
That's because I haven't been there many times, but when I got there, I'm like, everybody here is Russian. Like, who are all these people? Who are these Russians? We're being invaded again. What are all these shiny tombstones with people's faces on them?
Incredibly recreated faces where I'm like, this is eerie.
It is eerie. But it was weird that there was so many.
Yeah, there's a big concentration. I think it was the area or the neighborhood around it, I think.
It's just like John's. Cemeteries are a lot like John's.
Cemeteries are a lot like John's. You're right. Do John's know
In that
this?
I can taste a little bit of everything. And nobody stops me because I have money.
I have money. I'm there after the gates have closed. So yeah, 1920s to 30s, you have a lot of the multicultural community there, Hollywood stars, and names familiar to LA history. And that's like the idea of it starting to solidify. But just as the Great Depression was rough on the country, the 1930s was a decade of decline for the Hollywood Memorial Cemetery as Forest Lawn grew in prominence. We'll learn later. Maybe, I don't know. There was a significant drop in burial services around this time. Also around this time, the thick stone wall was built around the grounds after complaints were filed from trolley passengers who were annoyed at seeing tombstones on the route. Maybe people in the 30s...
How dare they? I'm trying to get to the job I hate.
I'm trying to spend an entire paycheck on getting drunk so I can beat my wife and kids. Maybe people in the 30s deserved a depression. Ownership changed hands a few times after that, but in 1939, it landed in the hands of a man named Jules Roth, a man as suave and debonair as his name. And if you're thinking that's the kind of name issued to a man who would be a character in Boardwalk Empire, you know, crook or a mobster, you weren't far off.
For
Roth. Oh my God. Are you going to do this the entire time?
I get paid to do this.
This is my income, okay? I'm getting married soon. 2 years earlier, Jules Roth was released from San Quentin State Prison for grand theft and securities fraud. How come? Surely this guy I've never heard of is innocent, right? You rube. No one is innocent in 1920s and 1940s Los Angeles. The story of Roth's time in San Quentin begins with a figure of old LA crime history that we have never touched on, a man with a lady name, Courtney C. Julian, so he went by C.C. Julian, not C.C.,
That's what you wrote down earlier.
I did. You like that?
Yeah.
Pretty cool guy.
It's alliteration.
Now, it's also a callback. Meeklings will remember...
My two favorite things.
Yeah. Meeklings will remember that in the 1920s, we were going through a huge oil boom in the region that was making regular guys into millionaires. Think about like Doheny in 1897 struck oil in LA, and then he becomes Greystone Manor himself, Doheny.
He gets some sort of Beauty and the Beast curse, and unless he can find true love, he becomes a mansion.
Destined to kill his son over and over and over and over and over and over. Okay, anyways, 20-some years later, it reached the peak with hundreds and hundreds of oil derricks destroying the postcard-esque landscapes of Los Angeles. Back to C.C. Julian comes in from Canada and is like, all right, I want to be a millionaire, but I want to get my suits all oily. How do I do this? Well, he decided to take advantage of the oil speculators and investors. He put ads in the city papers asking people to help him come up with $175,000 to drill on a spot he was certain was going to gush.
This one looks juicy.
Juicy. I stepped on it. My shoes are all oily now. And I'm like, am I Jed Clampett?
Am I Jeddery Clumpet? Doth I Jeddery Clumpet? He's buried at, not him, but his family is buried at Valhalla.
So he's certain. This spot, it's going to gush, and I'm going to take all those investors with me.
I can feel it.
I
It's
can
throbbing.
feel it. The ad said the investments in this petroleum company, which was the Julian Petroleum, would rival all of the big oil companies in town. These sort of ads, they worked, and they worked well. And now he had an oil company that was actively drilling, if that's what you mean by it working, but he was not coming up with any big oil gusher that everyone was hoping for. But it seems like no one told Julian, because by the mid-20s, just in time for the jazz age, Julian was living like a celebrity. But he was not alone in this scheme. The vice president of Julian Petroleum and his right-hand man was Jules Roth, who fell in with C.C. Julian pretty early on. Two separate things.
That's a different story.
That's a different story. That's a little hush-hush. These two guys partied hard and lived like there would be...
Well, they were in love.
They lived like there would always be money. How does that story turn out? And just like that, it started to come apart. And it's so many words because I've only read internet articles and haven't seen the raw data. To sum everything up, the financial ledgers made no sense. The stock reports were gibberish. Julian didn't have a license to sell securities for his oil company, and the public pressure from investors was heating up. By this point, his scam had racked up $150 million amongst 40,000 investors. Funny enough, 40,000 was also the number of sheep that Lancashire raised in the valley, and that's the recipe for a joke that is too easy to touch. $150 million, which in those days would buy the Earth's core. I don't know why I wrote that. One night in 1924, Roth came by Julian's...
You think you can make money on Patreon like me, don't you?
I need to pay my babies. My babies. They don't
want,
eat food.
They want a laugh.
They eat
want a
particle
laugh.
board every night.
My babies, they eat Patreon accounts.
One night in 1924, Roth came by Julian's place and someone fired 3 shots through a window, almost killing them. Julian was ousted from his company, which later just collapsed, and he went on the run to Shanghai, where he quickly blew through all whatever money he had left. He blew through it, and in 1934, he killed himself. Back in LA, the scandal spread as well. The district attorney was sentenced to jail for bribery. A lawyer named Motley Flint, who helped in the scheme, was testifying on a different trial.
That's not a lawyer's name. This guy's a con artist, too.
Come on, Motley Flint. He helped in the scheme, and he's testifying, but on a different trial. And an investor who lost $35,000 in the oil scheme came into open court and shot him.
What?
Yeah.
He walked into the
Open court
Wow.
and shot Motley Flint.
And he probably got off for it.
Everyone's like,
prove it. Yeah.
the jurors like, he was guilty anyways. I mean,
It's his word against ours.
we didn't even see it. He gets shot and the judge is like, order.
I'll allow it.
But I want to see where you're going with this. And this whole escapade is known as the Great Los Angeles Swindle. And there's a book by that name by Jules Teigel on the entire thing, which I'm dying to read now after doing it. Anyways, it's 1932 now, and Jules Roth is on the run in Canada on 39 criminal counts. He gets arrested in Winnipeg, goes to trial, and manages to escape through a dormant for the jurors, but is later found in New York and then extradited to Los Angeles, where
I think I counted 13.
No, it's not me.
No.
He's on like a pedal plane.
Yeah. What are you talking about?
A boot. Oh, sorry. He's extradited back to Los Angeles after he's caught in New York, and he's convicted of 29 of those 39 counts, and he's sentenced to 9 to 95 years in San Quentin. Well, it's closer to 9 because he only served 5 years of it. Then is released, and this is where we left off. Jules Roth, former vice president of Julian Petroleum, a company that racked up in one of the greatest and most damaging schemes in LA history, is now the owner of Hollywood Memorial Cemetery, the place where his parents had been buried, and it goes great.
People who own cemeteries are like, they must just be so focused on dead people that they don't understand, like, this guy's a criminal. Why are you hiring him?
That's true. I brought it up to somebody and they're like, oh yeah, like there's a lot of crooked people behind cemeteries. Like, is that a thing?
My next one, this weird.
We're on to them.
We've cracked the case.
This
is our cereal, which is how I refer to my bread. As in our money. I'm going to bring home the cereal for Melissa.
Let's go out there
finally.
and get the cereal.
Let's earn some cereal. Cereals for closers.
Has Jules Roth been reformed? Tune in now. Also, how did he manage to buy a cemetery 2 years after coming out of prison? I don't know, but he bought out all the shareholders of this private company that had probably crooked stuff. He probably just like held up a Piggly Wiggly and was like, okay, well, I have the money to buy a cemetery now. I don't even know where to begin with this guy. He ran the cemetery for I think like 6 decades, and just know he lived lavishly while the grounds of Hollywood Memorial went unkept. First off, they had to build that wall, right? That stone wall, so trolley riders.
Telling me, 2020.
They had to build that stone wall so trolley riders wouldn't have to be reminded of their own demise. While Roth had to try to make the money back and get the cemetery making money again. So he transferred some of the property that was outside of the wall to a holding company and tried to sell it to commercial businesses, but that didn't really pan out because of the zoning laws. So it sat there until 1984 when it got sold, and now it's that strip of auto businesses and a Little Caesars right there, which is why there's a beautiful old cemetery shares a block with
Little Caesars
and a Little Caesars. Yeah, there's another story about this little.
I like how you love Little Caesars so much you won't even admit that it's a blemish on the face of a cemetery.
Hey,
unless this is a Catholic tradition, you leave pizzas on people's graves.
I'm gonna go visit Grandma, and I want to have a pizza because we used to eat pizza together, and she used to love Little Caesars because I just run over there. Guess what?
I could buy 10 of them for $1.
I just have to walk around this stone wall. 10 minutes this way, 10 minutes back, 10 minutes. It's 40 minutes later. Me and Grandma are having pizza, just like old times. The cemetery suffered because people weren't having their family members buried there, and they weren't because they couldn't, because under Roth's reign, Memorial Park was segregated. But one of the bigger, most notable strikes was against Hattie McDaniels, one of the stars of Gone with the Wind, who was a prominent Angelino, was refused to plot at Hollywood Memorial.
Like every single place she turned in life or death, it was like, nope, not here.
No, not in this era. Along with that sort of stuff, he kept daily reports on all of his employees. He collected porno postcards from all around the world.
Ew. He must have had a Patreon account.
He must have had a Patreon account. He was just sending it to fans. His office was equipped with a wet bar. He had a 103-foot... You're going to say Ilda boat? You're such a virgin. He had a 103-foot yacht named the Queen of Sheba, which he argued was for scattering the ashes of the dead so he can claim it in his taxes. But everyone knew it was a party boat for mistresses. On this yacht, he was said to gracefully take ashes of loved ones out to sea. It's said that the employees found several urns in his office that were supposed to have been scattered in the Pacific. By the way...
white ash. A lot of white, valuable ash.
He kept them in baggies.
And he had a spoon in it, too.
And he had a George Lopez DVD with these ashes lined up perfectly. Ask me about that memory. By the way, it's said that eventually he sold the corner part of that land, the auto businesses, because the IRS got wind of this yacht debacle, and he had to pay this.
Usually, wind is good for a yacht.
Not this time, because of the back taxes, and it didn't pan out. He had to sell that part of the thing to pay off this yacht. The guy continued partying hard as if it was still the Julian Petroleum days, and all the while the cemetery was crumbling. You know, the lawn went unattended, and no one on the outside knew where the money was going, if not groundskeeping. Even in this, I read this 1988 LA Times article by Ron Russell. It was about the decaying cemetery, and it shows the money was being mismanaged, and Roth was, of course, declined to say how much was spent on maintenance. To paraphrase, all the cemeteries are required to invest a portion of their earnings in an endowment care fund and to spend the interest in upkeep, but the cemetery Cemetery Board doesn't have the authority to impose sanctions against ill-kept cemeteries. So records show of the $1.7 million endowment, over $143,000 was to go to upkeep. Roth was siphoning this money for himself. On top of the yachts and the parties and the wet bars, he would buy art.
Like a beautiful lawn.
He had a jungle growing in his backyard. He would buy art and sculptures for the cemetery, but keep the best pieces for himself to be kept in his Hollywood Hills home. It was also said in the Unauthorized Guide to Hollywood Forever that Roth was considering drilling for oil on the property, which shows how deep his greed was to be figuratively and literally robbing graves and still trying to find ways to cash in.
We're going to drill straight through Tyrone Power. I know there's oil down there.
Right underneath him. We can take his body out, but I think that if it goes through Tyrone Power...
it's good luck.
Yeah, I think it's good luck. If it goes through his ribcage. If you think he wouldn't be so crass to have an oil derrick on cemetery grounds, remember that it shares a block with a strip mall. So, obviously not.
And a Little Caesar.
And a Little Caesar. You know, how dare you?
You know, I oughta your face.
At this point, the only real money the cemetery was making was when families were having their loved ones removed and taken to better grounds. If you remember, Max Factor was one of those where he was taken out and moved to a better ground. I can't remember where. That's how Hollywood Memorial was. People were angry. Some people felt humiliated that their loved ones were surrounded by a foot-tall grass. The roads in the cemetery were covered in potholes. The grass was tall. The windows of the mausoleum were dirty and rusty or broken. The reflecting pool in front of Douglas Fairbanks Memorial, he's buried there, that was like murky and gross.
It looked like Echo Park. Take that. You put down the valley before.
How does it feel
Choke
now?
on this.
Choke on this. You come after Little Caesars, and I say nothing. There was graffiti on Cecil DeMille's tomb. By the way, Cecil DeMille is buried there. The last person to be cremated there was reportedly Mama Cass of the Mamas and Papas.
Really?
And apparently, in the old crematory, the bricks were so old and crumbly that they collapsed on her body as she was being cremated. Oh yeah, Mama
my
Cass is buried there.
God.
You thought
Wow.
the way she died was embarrassing.
You thought the way she lived and was treated was embarrassing. Wait till you hear about her death and subsequent cremation. My God.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
One night, vandals toppled 114 tombstones. Another time, thieves stole an entire stained glass window. In the 80s, the decomposing head of a woman was stolen from a crypt and found underneath a parked car outside of cemetery grounds. Here's a weird thing that happened. In the 1950s, a guy went to his first wife's grave there on the grounds under a cedar tree and killed himself by inhaling carbon monoxide from a cylinder in a briefcase. What? That's neither Roth's fault nor a sign of decay of the property. It was just like a weird thing that was spooky that I read.
How could that work?
No idea. He had a canister filled with carbon monoxide in a
But
briefcase.
like you're still out, and maybe he like plugged his
He must
nose
have
or
plugged-
something.
yeah, he must have done
That's
that.
horrifying.
Yeah, terrifying. Anyways, Hollywood Memorial was dying.
Happy Halloween.
Anyways, Hollywood Memorial was dying, and the 1994 earthquake certainly didn't help. It further damaged the decaying mausoleums. All this about Roth, it wasn't discovered until after he died in 1998. I read in the Unauthorized Guide that he kept his past well-headed. It wasn't even brought up in the LA Times article about how the money was not going towards upkeep, and they didn't know that he served in San Quentin.
Simpler times.
It was revealed by state inspectors that Roth had illegally mixed money from Hollywood Memorial with another cemetery he operated, and the money meant for the upkeep of both was obviously not going towards upkeep, and they didn't even know the extent of it because the statute of limitations prevents auditors from looking back more than just a few years. How he got away with it for so long, and so obviously I'll never know. He was buried at Hollywood Memorial with his parents, but thankfully removed later. Sometimes crime does pay. It's a real bummer. A year before his death, when the Hollywood Cemetery Association filed for bankruptcy and the state inspectors first started catching wind of all this, they took a look at the finances. There was $1.8 million in cemetery maintenance fund. Cool. $2.3 million in debt. Oh boy. And the repairs would require upwards of $10 million. Oh no. So the cemetery was obviously put up for auction, and the highest bid was $275,000, and it won.
Wait a minute. We could have bought.
Okay.
We could have pooled our finances and bought out in cash.
In cash, obviously. Half from me, half from you, obviously, because we're both sitting on whatever half of $275,000 is.
A number so high we can't even count to it.
It was such a sad cemetery. But
Figure.
like the bones of Tyrone Power are pretty expensive.
That alone will cover it.
Yeah, right?
Auction the bodies off.
Imagine.
Suddenly there's an influx of Hollywood memorabilia after this graveyard was sold.
Authentic Hollywood memorabilia that if you wanted to bring a certain actor back from the dead. It was bought by a 28-year-old man from St. Louis whose family owned a mortuary chain. His name was Tyler Cassidy, and along with his brother Brent, they wanted to save Hollywood Memorial Park Cemetery. He began repairing the cemetery. He fixed the structural damage to the mausoleum. He had graffiti removed, weeds cut, new signs installed, potholes filled. He came in and saved the place, and when he was done, he renamed it the Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
What year was this?
1999, 1998.
It seems like an older name.
They also knew that they needed to repair the city's idea of the cemetery, because I'll tell you this. In middle school, my bus went down Santa Monica Boulevard, and I passed this place every weekday for 3 years, and I really didn't know what it was.
Build a bigger wall.
Have one tombstone outside so I know that there's a cemetery, because I would have stared at it in middle school. Like, I knew Forest Lawn, obviously. When I passed Evergreen, I knew it was pretty evident it's a graveyard, but I'd passed Hollywood Forever, and I had no idea what it was. Like passing the Scientology Celebrity Center, which we also passed. I just thought it was rich, spooky stuff. Like, I didn't know what it was.
So I joined both of them.
In 1999, they had a cemetery added to the National Register of Historic Places, which was long overdue, but so was everything necessary with this place. Cassidy also undid a wrong by offering to move Hattie McDaniel's remains to Hollywood Forever to honor her final request, but her family decided against moving her remains there.
Where is she?
I don't remember. I didn't look that up.
Racist. Go on.
Another place. She never died. She decided to not die if she couldn't go there.
I'd rather live than die here.
How does she keep doing it? So Cassidy put up a 4-foot tall gray and pink granite memorial dedicated to McDaniel and invited the public to a dedication ceremony. The memorial piece has a quote from her great nephew that reads, "And Hattie, you were a credit to your craft, your race, and to your family." And the peacocks. Okay. I'm not sure where the peacocks became a fixture, but they could be seen roaming the grounds during the week, but they're locked up in a pen during the weekend. Someone on Reddit said it was because they often would shriek or stamp at grieving visitors. I don't know if that's true. Take it for whatever Reddit is worth. I haven't read anything official about the peacocks, but I can assume because they symbolize resurrection in Christianity, I'm sure that's why they're kept at Hollywood Forever.
They do?
That's what I read. In 2002, they began hosting movies and events there. That's when Cinespia started, 2002, where they began showing movies on the side of the mausoleum. It was the plan of a guy named John Wyatt, and the first movie that's shown there was Strangers on a Train. I've been to maybe 3 or 4 of these, and although it's annoying, and look, hey, sidebar, listen, if I've been waiting in line and me and my girlfriend have been sitting there in the sun for a couple hours and we get to the gates and we get through the gates and you're behind us and you run in front of us, you're cheating, okay? That's not fair, and I hope that you die in your way over there to that spot that should have been mine, and they don't find your stupid thieving petty body for months.
It's a graveyard. What do you?
Yeah, he had. Oh, I thought he was just chilling.
We found a dead body in a graveyard. So what?
So what? He couldn't afford to go underground. We just left him on top. It's once the movie. It's
Sounds
kind of
great.
annoying. It's kind of annoying sometimes, but when the movie starts, it's a lot of fun to be in a cemetery in the open air watching and stuff. Some people have mentioned that it might be disrespectful. I could see that, but at no point did the host make fun of the dead. I don't feel like anything is disrespectful towards the grave sites. You're not really amongst the. You're obviously not sitting on a tombstone or something.
You're not.
No.
How is there that much open space, though? I mean, someone's sitting on a
There's a field
tombstone.
in front of the mausoleum that there's nothing there. There's spaces where there's nothing.
But don't like 20,000, maybe not that much, but aren't there like thousands of people at these things? Someone's got to be sitting on a tombstone.
I don't think that they are. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but I think that there's enough spaces where I think like the middle section, there's like, it's so like dense, but I think that they control where people sit. I don't think that they would ever allow people to sit on a tombstone.
Okay. Because I did hear in terms of respectfulness, like they refused to show Night of the Living Dead or that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think they did it 1 year, then they stopped doing it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they tried it. They found
like,
the
this
line.
Isn't cool. Yeah. I don't feel like anything's disrespectful. And if you're the kind of person that goes to a grave and talks to a loved one and says, sorry, I don't visit you much, you can allow yourself to see this as like everyone's sitting with your loved one and watching Showgirls. Like they're like, this is a
Grandma would
party.
have loved Showgirls.
Grandma loves Showgirls. The thing about the screens to me is that it rides the line between Hollywood the neighborhood and Hollywood the idea.
Yeah.
Because this kind of event, watching classic movies on the site of an old historic mausoleum, which holds the remains of movie stars while you're sitting on a lawn named after Douglas Fairbanks next to Paramount Studios, that is a Hollywood event. That's like, people will pay money for that. But Hollywood the neighborhood, like lower income South Hollywood that has so many different cultures and ethnicities and religions and rituals residing there.
And Great Johns.
The Johns there.
The Johns.
Oh, the Johns on Santa Monica Boulevard. This hipster thing might not be respectful to them. So it certainly rides the line.
Yeah.
They started giving tours of the grounds there by Carrie Bible.
You're kidding.
That's funny.
What's her middle name? Alice? Carrie A. Bible?
That's funny. There's been concerts there. They have live podcast recordings. Last Podcast on the Left is recorded there. There's a Dia de los Muertos event that my family took part in for like, I think 4 or 5 years, and we loved it. We loved building the altar.
I regret never going. You would always ask me to go, and I would never go because it sounded...
You're a bad friend.
No, because it's your family. It's not me or you. It's your family.
I met your family. No thanks.
But it just, I don't know, because it sounded crowded and hard to get to, and you had to pay to get in.
You had to pay to get in.
Yeah, that's
it was incredibly hard to park. But like,
it sounded cool.
We would get there at 6 a.m, so it wasn't hard to park at 6 a.m. We
That was also part of the problem.
It's a big part of the problem. Yeah, we love building the altar. We love walking around, meeting other people, sharing stories, checking out the altar. It was like a great event that I really do miss. Some people criticize it and say that's like American commercialization of the Day of the Dead. Again, And it seemed to be run by people in the Latino community who really cared about Day of the Dead and tried to keep traditions authentic. So I never really got a sense that it was being co-opted, but it also doesn't feel like a humble day of honoring the dead. And a lot of people show up to the event in Halloween costumes, which is disrespectful to both Day of the Dead and the cemetery. Unless you're robbing graves, then it makes sense. But it wasn't all wholesome hipster hijinks for the Cassidys, because it was discovered that Brent, the brother, and their dad, Doug Cassidy, along with several other partners, were indicted for fraud in the pre-need funeral business, which I've read correctly deals with selling funeral plots to the living.
We'll be talking about that
long before the people need it, pre-need.
That's the name of the game in the next story.
It said that $600 million in funds disappeared, and although unlikely since Brent left Hollywood Forever in 2000, it's thought that maybe some of that went towards the repairs of Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Again, not proven, it's just speculation. They pleaded guilty to wire fraud and money laundering and sentenced to prison, not Tyler Cassidy, who's kind of the main push of Hollywood Forever. The story of Hollywood Forever Cemetery is such a perfect reflection of the city, starting as a wheat field or maybe an orchard, and then it was bought by two founders of the city who were exploiting land for wealth, then run corruptly and disgracefully by a former crook no one bothered to look into, and finally adopted and made whole by one possibly good guy with his crooked family from another city. That is so quintessentially LA. A cemetery that places historical figures, movie stars in the same place as just regular Los Angeles residents, the high and the low resting amongst each other, all in perfect harmony. Is so LA. And
better get along.
That's Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
And it forever will be.
Got him. Got it in.
That's one of the major cemeteries in the city. But now I'm going to get to another one. The other. There is the other. There's one more big cemetery in this city.
No, there's not.
And this one, some may say, is better. It's not so disrespectful, although a lot of people said that. Forest Lawn. The only way to die. This patch of land that would soon be the place the formerly rich and famous call nothing because they're all dead, started at 1712 South Glendale Avenue in Glendale.
The one I would stare at from my register at Staples.
Could you really see it from there?
I'd be staring at my...
Yeah, I've never been to the Glendale one.
It's very nice. I have many family members there.
Really?
3. My grandparents and my cousin are there.
You're part of history.
My brother got married there.
Really?
Yeah. And a funeral for the guy who got killed behind me was there.
Really? Really? Well, we're going to touch on all of that, especially the guy who got killed behind your house. So this whole area used to be part of Rancho San Rafael.
Okay.
But in the late 1800s, it was bought by a lawyer named Andrew Glassell of Glassell Park.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
In 1905, his daughter sold it to J.B. Treadwell, who was apparently some sort of criminal, but I couldn't find out specifically what kind.
Horse thief, murder. I don't know.
They're all criminals to me.
Wire fraud? Cutting people's heads off. I don't know.
But yeah, another criminal was involved in the early days of this cemetery. But after him, on September 18th, 1905, it was sold to the Tropico Land and Improvement Company with the intent of making it a cemetery, which they opened January 11th, 1906. Whole part of town.
Tropico.
Yeah, I didn't know it was called, but yeah, that area used to be called Tropico.
Yeah, it got incorporated by Glendale. Pretty smart guy.
Prove it. The cemetery, it was 55 acres. It only had 10 of those developed for use, and it was called Forest Lawn Cemetery.
Okay.
However, they weren't selling many plots in these early years. By August 1910, things were at their worst, and the cemetery was in grave trouble. So they contacted two men.
Stop it.
That's really going to cost you. They contacted two men in another part of the country who were known for making cemeteries profitable. A man named Sims, who we'll get to, but most importantly, a man named Eaton, who we'll get to now. Hubert Lou Wright Eaton was born June 3rd, 1881 in Liberty, Missouri. When he was a teenager, his dad died suddenly in Cairo on a trip to the Holy Land. So a lot of pressure was put on him to help support the family when it came time for college, which he started in 1897 at the school his dad had been a science professor at, William Jewell College, which is also the school that was founded by Jesse James's dad. Oh my God. And Jesse, Liberty, Missouri was where Jesse James was from, and so he was like, they didn't know each other,
but like they could have.
Hometown boys. His first summer there, however, he visited his aunt's ranch in Montana where he punched cattle. And I don't know what that means.
Well, I'm pretty sure we both know what that means. It used to serve a purpose, but now it's just kind of mean.
And the lure of making money and punching bovines was too strong, so he ended up staying there a whole year before he went back to college. He studied chemistry, but he was slowly finding out that his real talents lied in business and marketing, not just cattle punching.
Happy birthday.
Oh no, it happened.
It happened.
Oh no, it's happening.
Oh no, I'm turning into Greg.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, how many strokes of midnight? That's what just happened, everybody. I just turned 31.
Yeah.
My voice
I
may
just
sound a
turned
little
31 right now.
Sorry, I just took out a loan. I'm 31.
I'm just strapping on a tie to go to my real people job. That's not part-time.
I'm going to my professional podcast now. How many strokes of midnight on my birthday have I been with you? I think like probably 3 or 4.
3 or 4, yeah, for sure 3 or 4.
It's weird.
It is weird.
I don't know why I'm always with you at midnight. Oh yeah, I remember. This is why.
This horrible lifestyle that we chose.
Which gets me back to let me just take it in.
Bask in it.
31. I'm beautiful. I'm 31.
I'll never age again.
This is the last time. God, 31. Wow.
Hey, remember, it's meaningless. Go ahead.
Hey, remember, we're talking about graveyards to remind you just how much closer you are. He realized that his talents were in business and marketing. This started becoming clear when he joined the basketball team, which at the time, basketball was considered a sissy game because it was indoors and there was no contact.
This isn't war.
When do you stab? He quickly became the heartthrob on every sports team and was elected team business manager.
Wow, like Joe Namath.
His first order of business was to raise ticket prices, but he also needed to get more people interested in the game. So he started taking out ads for the team in the paper and making flashy posters to put all around campus, come watch our games. When the Haskell Indians were coming to play a good old-fashioned game of sissy ball, free of any political correctness, Eaton made up a poster saying the Indians are coming, and he put it all around town. And all this promotion worked, and under his guidance, the basketball team started making enough money not only to cover their team fees, but all the team fees for all the sports teams in the school. Marketing. Sex sells. And he sold his sex, all right. He sure sold his sex. Good night, everybody. I'm 31.
This joke is not more immature than me.
This joke will age better than I am. But after graduating, he decided to put those business skills to rest, and he utilized his chemistry degree instead and got a job working at a mine in Montana. And within 4 years, he was promoted to first research chemist of that mine. Cool. After this, he got an even better job as chief chemist at a mine in Pueblo, Mexico. And then in 1909, he became general manager of his cousin's silver mine in Nevada. And that mine made $1 million in its first year. They built a whole town with new roads, new equipment around this mine. And then the earth shifted and the silver vein was lost. And they spent a year.
How do we keep the earth from shifting like that again?
I don't want to find another one. They spent a year and all of their money trying to find the silver vein again, and they did not. So now Eaton was lost. And in 1911, he found himself in St. Louis, where a friend told him about this man named C.B. Sims. That's not C.B.
No,
C.B.
C.B.
He had a crazy business proposition, which you were getting to. You see, at the time, when somebody died, you'd buy them a plot in a cemetery and you'd bury them. There was no pre-planning. There was no dibs on a spot in a cemetery before you were actually dead. But Sims believed that there was a market for people to buy cemetery plots for themselves while they were still alive, which was unheard of.
Right.
It was like ghoulish. You would not do this.
I'm going to die one day. Stop it.
No, you won't.
Stop it.
No, you won't.
We don't know that.
I'm 31. I'm going to die tomorrow. Sims pitched this idea of before need plots to Eaton, who was extremely skeptical, but he decided to put his old business skills to work, and he started going door to door to sell living people cemetery plots. And he found that most people were not interested, except very Christian people. They were very interested, and Eaton had finally found a new silver vein. Fearful Christians.
Who love peacocks.
Who love peacocks and Little Caesars. Eaton and Sims formed the American Securities Corporation, selling people before need plots, and their reputation spread far enough to Glendale, California, where the failing Forest Lawn Cemetery decided to reach out to them. In early 1913, Eaton and Sims took over sales operations of Forest Lawn with aggressive marketing on billboards, in the papers, on the radio.
Feel like dying soon?
Yeah. Are you 31? They would send people things in the mail. This was hand in hand with the city's land boom also.
Oh, right,
New people needed new land to live on. They needed new land to die on. But even so, people weren't buying. It was just like
I ain't buying it.
I don't believe it. Maybe it was the overall skepticism of the before need plots being sold, or maybe it was that the World War, the first one, was about to start and people were distracted, or maybe it was because a flood in 1914 took out the bridges going across the river to get into Glendale, but things weren't good.
I like that you couldn't sell plots to people who were going to war or were going to die, and the floods where people were dying were making it worse, and people were still like, no, I don't have to worry about this.
Not that. By this point, Sims had left the picture, but Eaton hung on on, and by 1915, business was actually starting to pick up. I wonder why, World War I. But now Eaton wanted a piece of the action and a bigger role in the cemetery, but the owners denied him that. So in 1916, he started making plans to buy 100 acres in Eagle Rock to start his own cemetery, and this scared those old ghouls at Forest Lawn. They gave him whatever he wanted to then become manager. Within a year, he was president of the cemetery. But though business was picking up, Eaton still had a fundamental problem with the cemetery. It was ugly. To be honest, it was downright fugly. It was overgrown, and it was
gonna date you.
No,
What a hitter.
I'd rather spit her. Is that how it goes? I don't know.
I was referencing Marla Hooch, but it's fine. Go ahead.
It was overgrown. It was bleak. It was grim. It looked like a cemetery. So as the legend goes, Eaton on January 1st, 1917 was walking over the grounds, and he wondered, why does a graveyard have to be a sad place? Why did they have to be so gray and oppressive? Couldn't there be a beautiful passage to eternity instead of a little piece of hell? Why wouldn't there be a cemetery that only emphasized the positive memories of people and the sunny Southern Californianess of life? This was the day he decided to write what became known as the Builder's Creed, and he himself became known as the Builder.
Wow. Bob?
It was his mission statement for how he planned on reshaping Forest Lawn.
Okay.
Now I'm just picturing Bob the Builder etching this into a wall. He wanted to erase all signs of mourning, make it a place dedicated not to death, but to eternal life.
Okay.
I know the cemeteries of today are wrong because they depict an end, not a beginning. I therefore prayerfully resolve on this New Year's Day, 1917, that I shall endeavor to build Forest Lawn as different, as unlike other cemeteries, as sunshine is unlike darkness, as eternal life is unlike death. He wanted to turn it into what he referred to as God's garden. He toured the big cemeteries of the U.S. to try to figure out why they weren't treated as places of beauty and a place someone would want to spend time in. He wanted to know why they were seen as places you go to out of duty and not a place you appreciate. What he found on his tour were the grim old graveyards of the East Coast, with the exception of Mount Auburn Cemetery in Boston, which was unique in the U.S. for being more like a park than a small enclosed space, but it was still littered with these crumbly old tombstones. This is when Eaton came up with a concept that changed the entire cemetery world: no tombstones. They gave an overwhelming mood to a cemetery, which was counter to what he wanted, so he banned tombstones from Forest Lawn in favor of flat markers in the ground.
Yeah.
Nothing that sticks up.
It's a good look.
It is, because we'll get to, this was all part of the plan, but when I was at the Hollywood Hills one, it's like, where, like, this is vast. Like, this is a big, open, nice space. Where am I?
Yeah, it's a very serene, it's easy on the eyes.
That's something we can relate to. There was no other cemetery in the world that had this as their official policy, to have no tombstones. So any standing tombstones you might see at Forest Lawn Glendo, those are leftovers from the oldest parts of the cemetery.
Yeah.
Next up were the names. This was no longer a cemetery. This was Forest Lawn Memorial Park. The other innovation he started was the naming of each section of the park, which was not something that cemeteries did. There's Whispering Pines, Dawn of Tomorrow, Slumberland, Graceland, Borderland. There's also Babyland and Lullaby Land, which are for children, complete with a replica of Sleeping Beauty's castle. And if that wasn't sad enough, the area is shaped like a heart, and around the heart are moms who wanted to be buried close to their kids. You know, we have been talking about cemeteries
This whole entire time. Man, we didn't just start right now.
This giving pleasant names to the different sections of plots was another Eaton first. These were all ideas that seemed crazy and revolutionary at the time, but by the 30s, all the big cemeteries in the world were incorporating these ideas that he laid out. To make the place even more inviting and pleasant, he had music playing on speakers throughout the park. Aside from the actual grave parts of the graveyard, he also wanted the rest of the place to be beautiful, with unobstructed views of the surrounding area, and more importantly, architecture and art. All the buildings and churches there that were built in the park were modeled after other renowned buildings in Britain and Italy, but Eaton took his art seriously, and he took it to a level no cemetery had ever seen before. Since he wanted this to become a place people come just to visit and enjoy the beauty, he needed art for that. So he proposed this to the board of directors. They told him art has no place in a cemetery, and more importantly, it's expensive.
Yeah, we'll take artists. We won't take art.
So Eaton just took it upon himself and bought his first piece of art with his own money. Duck Baby, which is a statue of a girl holding a duck under each of her arms. That was the first one he got. He got that at the Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco. But once you buy a duck baby, you can't just buy one duck baby.
Yeah,
you got to get all the duck mama, duck daddy,
wings.
the full duck dynasty.
Yeah.
He wanted Michelangelo's next, but he didn't just want he knew that much. I can't get a Michelangelo, but he didn't just want cheap knockoffs. He looked all over Europe to find the best recreation of Michelangelo's sculptures.
Yeah.
Forest Lawn is now the only place in the world with a complete set of reproduced Michelangelo sculptures. They're even made with rock from the same quarries as the real ones were. The only thing that was not exact in the collection was that the David there used to have a fig leaf over the juiciest part, which people called them prudes for years.
Show me the peepees.
I want to see it. You're being withholding.
If he doesn't show his, you got to show yours. Rules are rules.
You show me his, I'll show you mine. In the 1971 earthquake, the whole statue crumbled.
Oh my God. Except for one part.
The fig leaf fell off. I knew it was under there. The picture of that is so funny though, because it's not Eaton, but it's the other guy who took over, and he's like, it's a David and Goliath photo where he's just standing over this crumbled statue of David. So then when they decided to make a new one, they decided that the public was mature enough to see David the way Michelangelo made him. So now the new one is raw and exposed for anyone to go and sketch.
You pervert.
You like that?
You like
you go to
that,
a cemetery and that's what you're looking for?
I came for bones, not this.
Not one particular one. There are marble statues all around the Great Mausoleum that were made in Rome in the 20s by Ernesto Gazzeri. The front gates are the biggest wrought iron fences in the world.
Really?
They're bigger than Buckingham Palace.
Wow.
The Memorial Court of Honor, which Eaton saw as the Westminster Abbey of Southern California, has a stained glass on it that took 7 years to make. And today, throughout all the forest lawns, there's over 500 pieces of stained glass. There's also an Americana section to the place with sculptures of Teddy Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, Mark Twain, and George Washington. Speaking of Washington, supposedly the giant chain links in the Court of Freedom, there were some of the actual chain links that were used to defend the Hudson River in 1776.
You're kidding.
That's what they say, which that's crazy that they have it. It's also crazy that they put giant chain links across a river to keep out.
They were still figuring things out.
If we pull it up, the boats will trip.
The boat legs will trip, right?
The first building dedicated specifically as an art gallery there was Hawley Terrace, but since 1957 they've had their museum there filled with things like they have one of the Easter Island heads. They have a collection, one of every type of coin mentioned in the Bible, which used to belong to Eaton's dad. They have tons of exhibits also that have nothing to do with the cemetery, which sounds kind of weird, but it makes sense because Eaton wanted this to not just a cemetery, it's just another venue in the city for the living. And stay tuned a few weeks from now because we're going to be doing a field trip there in a couple weeks.
Get ready for it.
Before need, prepare for this. They also apparently used to have talking statues, which seem definitely not tacky.
Like in the Haunted Mansion?
Yeah. They would project in your car driving out. Oh, there might be someone in their back seat.
You might be taking grandma with you.
There's always one way out. It's the exit. But the crown jewel of the place may be one particular painting. It was made by a Polish painter named Jan Stajka when Forest Lawn was still a patch of grass without people under it. It was a painting of the crucifixion that was made between the year 1894 and 1897. And the reason it took so long, it's because it's 195 feet long and 45 feet tall.
You're kidding.
This was so deep of a religious obligation to Stajka to make this definitive painting of the crucifixion. Before he started, he had his paint palette blessed by Pope Leo XIII.
Wow.
He didn't tell him he's got green all over his face.
I'm still astounded by the size of it.
Speaking of David. No, we'll get to more about the size.
Yeah.
I mean,
we'll talk about fitting it in. We'll fit it in later. No.
Oh, geez. But yeah, no, it's huge. The finished thing was so moving and impressive, it started going on tour around Europe and was even put on display in one of the palaces of Tsar Nicholas II, who was the last Tsar, the Rasputin Tsar of Russia. He was the last one. But in 1904, it came to America for the St. Louis World's Fair, and everything got ruined. When it got there, they realized it was too big to display anywhere in St. Louis.
We're going to park a spruce goose on top of it.
There was no room, so they just rolled it up. But Stajka had brought other paintings of his to display and sell, but a fire broke out at the fair and burned all of those on the last night of the expo. So now all he had was no money and a 195-foot-long painting of the crucifixion. So when he tried to leave the country, he couldn't afford the exit tax on the painting, so he had to leave it behind, and it got lost until 1943 when it was found wrapped around an old telephone pole in the basement of the Chicago Civic Opera Company building. This thing that entertained the last Tsar of Russia was like being peed on by gangsters in Chicago. The second Eaton found out about this mythical lost masterpiece being found, he said, gimme. But he wanted to see it to make sure it was the real deal. So he paid to have it put on personal display for him at the only place in Los Angeles big enough to do that, the Shrine Auditorium.
Oh, yeah.
So once he saw it, and
tall.
I can't even imagine how big this thing is, but we're going to see it.
Yeah.
Once he saw it and confirmed it was authentic, he bought it for $250,000. Then he encountered the problem I always run into whenever I buy a piece of art. You end up spending even more on on the frame than you did on the painting. His problem was the Shrine Auditorium was the only place in the city big enough to display it. Shrine Auditorium isn't in Forest Lawn.
Yeah.
So now Eaton had to spend $1 million to build a hall in Forest Lawn big enough to display this painting. It was the Hall of the Crucifixion Resurrection. It was dedicated on Good Friday, 1951, making Steica's painting now the biggest permanently displayed religious painting in the world.
Two of the biggest things in the world in one space.
Yep.
Glendale.
Yep. They also have a pretty big painting of the resurrection in there too, that they had a worldwide contest to find the best depiction of it. And so those two, like apparently you go in there and it's a massive auditorium and it gives you a thing like in the beginning there was, and then they're like, and then there was this, and it's music and the curtains open and it's 195 feet of crucifixion.
I bet that curtain takes like 30 minutes to open all the way.
So piece by piece, Forest Lawn started becoming a renowned place of beauty, so much so that in 1923, Cora Gregory Wells and Archie Milton Howes became the first people to get married at Forest Lawn, which sounds weird, but since then, your brother's been married there. Over 70,000 others have done the same thing, including Ronald Reagan and Regis Philbin to each other. All of this combined to make Forest Lawn the most visited tourist attraction in Southern California until 1957. That's 2 years after Disneyland opened. It was bigger than Disneyland for 2 years of its existence. But of course, a cheery cemetery that's a venue for art and joy was seen as repulsive to East Coasters, so Forest Lawn also became the target of criticism and parody. A writer, Jessica Mitford, said that Eaton had more influence on trends in the modern cemetery industry than any other human being. She didn't mean that in a good way. The place was referred to as Disneyland for the dead, also not in a good way. Disneyland, that's nice. For the dead. Evelyn Was the Loved One is a satire of Forest Lawn, which is referred to as Whispering Glades in that one. Aldous Huxley also wrote about it in After Many a Summer Dies the Swan. Speaking of your boat trip of yours. In that book, he calls it the Beverly Pantheon. Love it or leave it, though, Eaton in the early days had trouble selling people on the idea of being buried in a graveyard with no tombstones.
Yeah.
It was so crazy to people that they couldn't wrap their heads around it, but what they could wrap their heads around was a good discount. He had to offer people 10% off their funeral if they were willing to give up monument privileges, meaning no tombstone.
Yeah.
And it worked. But what really started making the place attractive to even more people was yet another of Eaton's revolutionary visions: to offer everything you would need for a funeral in one place to make the process as easy as possible.
Yeah.
So in 1917, he opened a crematorium on the premises. Then came the chapels, churches in there for services. Then came an administrative building to coordinate things, complete with a flower shop to buy your flowers.
Yeah.
But the sticking point was trying to open a mortuary inside the cemetery in the early 30s, because there had never been a mortuary inside of a cemetery before anywhere.
Yeah.
It was not done. The reasons were political, because the morticians were afraid that the convenience of a mortuary inside of a cemetery would be too convenient and it would take away their business.
Oh, I see.
And also their ability to charge whatever prices they came up with. They were also cutting secret deals with certain cemeteries to push their clients there, and they would get a piece of the deal. So they didn't want a place undercutting them. So there was an understanding that you didn't build a mortuary in your cemetery. So when Eaton ignored that age-old pact, they organized and they took action against him. The first thing they did was that the morticians used their political pull to get a law passed quickly saying that if you wanted to open a mortuary, you had to have a certain amount of caskets at the ready. And then they took it one step further by pressuring casket makers across the country to not sell caskets to Forest Lawn.
My God.
These are morticians.
We're going to make our own caskets then. Forest Lawn makes caskets now.
We bought a lumber factory. He came close to a deal with one company he found, but before it could go through, he got a call from the owner saying every funeral director in the country would boycott us if we sold to you. It would ruin us, so we can't sell anything to you. But they were saved at the last second. There was a group of independent funeral directors who didn't like the tactics that their peers were using, so they provided Forest Lawn with the caskets. But then they were still denied a mortuary because they said they didn't have a specific address since it was inside of a larger cemetery. So Eaton appealed this decision. He personally went to Washington, D.C.
Oh my God.
After tons of lobbying, promises, appeals on both sides, and a lawsuit from the granite companies and tombstone makers who were upset with Eaton for no tombstone rule, saying it was an unfair restraint of trade. And then there were battles with the state legislator, state board of funeral directors, the Great Northern Casket Company.
They're acting like this is the only cemetery ever.
Eventually, he got his mortuary, January 1st, 1934, the first one in the country to open inside of a cemetery. Now you could get everything anything you needed in one place, and their slogan was Forest Lawn, where one call does it all.
Nah, that rhymes. Their Patreon's exploding.
They've got at least $20. In 1949, they became one of the first cemeteries in the country to advertise their prices because most other places would be purposely secretive about it so they could take advantage of people in the time of crisis. You have no idea what a funeral should cost. So like whatever, I'll pay it. Their prices were so low that the LA County funeral directors once again sued them.
Oh my God.
Forest Lawn grew to 317 acres, but they also expanded into new locations. 1944, they bought 400 acres of El Rancho Providencia on the Hollywood Hills, serviced the population of the valley that was growing, 6,300 Forest Lawn Drive. First burial there was on March 8th, 1948. The art in that one is more colonial focused, and since this was built longer after the Builder's Creed, there are no tombstones at all anywhere in this place. 1959, they opened one in Cypress. 1965, they opened one in Covina Hills, which has the Life of Christ mosaic, which is the biggest mosaic in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow.
That's 172 feet long by 35 feet high. In 1978, they bought an older cemetery in Long Beach, made that their own. All in all, there's now 11 Forest Lawn locations in Southern California. Now, even though they say they give no preferential treatment to anybody who is buried there, the Glendale and Hollywood Hills ones are pretty well known for the celebrities.
Yep,
We're going celebrity hunting.
They wouldn't let me go see W.C. Fields.
Well, yeah.
yeah.
You shouldn't know. Nor should you. Let's name every single famous person buried there. Samuel Goldwyn, Edith Head, Gummo Marx, Mary Wells, Clark Gable, Walt Disney, Carol Lombard, Humphrey Bogart, W.C. Fields, don't look at him. Michael Jackson, also don't look at him. Elizabeth Taylor, Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, Lon Chaney, Nat King Cole, Sammy Davis Jr., Sam Cooke, Jimmy Stewart, Errol Flynn, Red Skelton, now goes by White Skeleton, Joe E. Brown, Chico Marx, Sid Grauman, Louis L'Amour, L. Frank Baum, Jack LaLanne, Spencer Tracy, Fay Ray, Fritz Lang, Albert Broccoli, Bob Clampett, Betty Davis, Lucille Ball, Liberace, Stan Laurel, Gene Autry, Lou Rawls, Carrie Fisher, Debbie Reynolds, Art Tatum, Lauren Bacall, Pope John Paul II visited Forest Lawn, Glendale once. Then there's the old friends of our show, King Gillette, the razor guy from Malibu, Marion Parker, Amy Semple McPherson, William Mulholland, William Wrigley Jr., and of course, Mary Pickford.
Sweet little Mary Pickford.
She's buried everywhere, actually.
That's where Marion Parker ended up?
Yeah. They're pretty secretive and they're discreet about where the celebrities are. They're not going to tell you because even though they want people just to hang out there, it's still a graveyard. Yeah. You aren't even allowed into the Grand Mausoleum because there's so many celebrities in there and just as many security cameras. There's also the secret garden where a lot of the big celebrities are, but only friends and family of people buried there have a special key to be able to get in there. The most exclusive part of the cemetery is the Court of Honor. You can only be buried here if you're specially selected by the Forest Lawn Council of Regents, and the only ones who have ever made it in here are Jan Steica, the guy who painted the crucifixion, Gutzon Borglum, who's the guy who made Mount Rushmore, Carrie Jacobs Bond, who wrote the song I Love You Truly, no idea, composer Rudolf Frimmel, no idea, Robert Andrews Millikan, who was a Nobel Prize winner for something I couldn't understand, Dr. Rufus B. von Kleinschmidt, who was a chancellor of USC, and the last one, of course, Eaton himself, who died September 20th, 1966 in Beverly Hills. Eaton had completely changed the funeral industry and the looks of cemeteries forever, but let's not also forget that in the early days of the cemetery, they didn't allow Jewish, Black, or Chinese people, and during the 60s, he was also pro-segregation. In 1945, Eaton's nephew...
Pretty big pothole there, huh?
In 1945, Eaton's nephew, Frederick Llewellyn, joined the place, and after Eaton died, management went over to him. Today, the place is now run by that guy's son. So now you know who to email to reserve an early spot in the Court of Honor for the two most important people in LA history. Us. Imagine
us dying. That's weird, huh?
I'm 31. I'm going to live forever. I'm 30. I'm going to live forever. Oh, no.
Oh, no. I had no idea all that about Forest Lawn.
Both of these things, because you were saying, like, what's there really to say about a cemetery? And I started Valhalla, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's crime haven. And then I started this, I was like, oh, okay, so this revolutionized cemetery. Of course it did.
It's so weird to think the words revolutionized cemeteries.
The hottest new thing in graveyards.
I thought it was just like, well, they're either above ground or they're below ground. Like, I thought that was the difference in cemeteries.
They could be a little bit of both. He perfected the carrot sticking out of the ground method where their heads would be sticking out. So yeah, those are cemetery. A little bit of spookiness for the Halloween season. Go visit these places, spook around. So now let's get to the listener question.
Yes, please.
This one is from Kevin Smith, not that one.
Oh, it's.
Have you guys seen Clerks? This one comes from Kevin Smith.
Hi, Kevin Smith.
Hi, Kevin. I know you're listening.
You making monsters right now? Tell us.
You making monsters, baby. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin, I'll see you at work. Here's the question. Do you guys have any personal, speaking of celebrities, any personal celebrity encounter stories from around LA? If not, make one up. We've got good ones. Well,
Yeah.
I know I have good
I have
ones.
like 8 written down. And separate. It doesn't count if you went to like a
No.
talk.
No.
And
I've seen Tom Hanks.
yeah, and you couldn't see them from afar and be like, oh, that's...
Yeah.
No. There had to be some kind of encounter.
Yes.
Okay. You do your 2 and I'll do my 8.
You just reminded me of one, but when I was sitting next to Buzz Aldrin, but that doesn't quite count because he was invited to that thing.
Yeah,
But I was sitting next to Buzz Aldrin. I
pretty
just want
nice.
people to know that. The first one was when I was interning at this place in Beverly Hills, and it was in a building. It's Beverly Hills, and there's celebrity stuff going on. It's all these film offices, and I'm walking out to lunch, and I'm not really paying attention because I'm an intern and I'm just being debased and degraded
For free.
And I loved it. I loved it so much. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm coming from one end of the hallway. Someone else is coming up from the other end of the hallway. We're both going towards the staircase to go to the front exit. And I see that it's this old guy, and I'm like, all right, we both get to the stairs at the same exact time. So we're walking down the stairs together, and then he kind of starts like limping, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy's gonna fall down the stairs. This old man's gonna fall down the stairs. I'm gonna have to call the ambulance. He's gonna die in my arms. Great.
Great. I'm going to be a hero to some people. Great.
Great. I killed the old man. Everyone will worship me. Then I get to the door first. I go out. I hold the door open for him. He says thanks. He walks by, and then as he walks by, a UPS guy's coming through. He's like, that was Steve Martin.
Oh my God. I remember you texted me after that.
And then I'm like,
You
what?
won't believe who I ignored.
He was on his phone. He was like dancing down the stairs next to me. I guess to like, I don't know if he was just having fun for himself or he was trying to make me laugh, but I was like ignoring him.
Oh my God.
And he's walking down the street, and I'm following him to see if like maybe I could still talk to him. And everyone in every car and restaurant is like, Steve Martin. They're all like looking.
The heat of Steve Martin.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then he gets to his car. He's going in his car, and someone goes up to him, and he's like, leave me alone. But that was my Steve Martin encounter, and I'll always regret not saying anything to him. Do you want to hear my second one, or do you want to do one?
No, I want to hear a second one.
You were here for the second one because when I was living in France.
Yes.
It was in a small town in the south of France, and Paul Cézanne's studio was there, and it was like a place you could visit. So I visited there, and it was like me and my friend, and nobody else was there. So we're just wandering around the gardens, and then I get to the front of the house, and Wes Anderson is there. And I was like, hi, Wes Anderson. And
We had the same haircut, Wes Anderson.
I took a picture with him,
Yeah.
and I was like, what are you doing here? And we talked for like a second, and then whoever he was with wanted to leave. So I was like, all right.
Yeah.
Bye. And then a year later, almost to the day, you and I are in Amoeba Records, and we go up to the DVD area, and Wes Anderson is across from me. And I went up to him, and I was like, do you remember 1 year ago, you were at Paul Cézanne's studio? I took a picture with you. And then he pretended to remember who I was. And then Fantastic Mr. Fox was about to come out, and I was like, I can't wait to see Fantastic Mr. Fox. And he's like, oh, okay.
You're thinking of Paul Thomas Anderson. You're like, oh, yeah.
I can't wait to see Magnolia. Oops. I was like, okay, well, it was good to see you again. And then he said, I'll see you somewhere out there. And I haven't seen him
charming.
since. Yeah, those are my 2 biggest celebrity experiences. What were yours?
Okay, the first one I'll get out of the way because it happened to both of us. We went to go see Conan, right? And not Albert Brooks, who sat right in front of us.
Oh, yeah.
But we were getting out of the car, and we were lost, and a voice came from the parking lot like, if you're looking for Conan, it's down there. And it was Sona Mosesian.
His assistant. Yeah.
Thank you, Sona.
Thank you, Sona. Can we have jobs? I mean, yeah, that doesn't count because Conan was the one talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, Albert Brooks was 2 seats in front
And we're
of
like,
us.
is that Robert Wool? No, idiot. Albert Brooks was like, 2 seats in front of us. I had to move out of the way because Albert Brooks was in my way. I'll rattle through the quick ones, then I'll get to the good ones. Sid Haig, who just passed, 2 days ago, yesterday, he sat in front of me when we went to go see Spider Baby at the New Beverly. He wasn't there to speak or anything, and he paid any attention to one of the stars of the movie. I was at the Standard one time for my friend Nick's birthday, and elevator doors opened up, and a guy came out with a big bodyguard, a guy with a crazy afro, and it was Phil Spector. And I walked right next to him, and I was almost frozen to place because this was after he killed that lady before he went to jail. In middle school, we were visited by an actress who graduated, and she was going to be in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids 3, but then before that, or after that, she was going to be in a TV show, and it was Mila Kunis. My friend Jessica was almost hit.
Ryan Gosling.
Ryan Gosling almost hit my friend Jessica with his car, and I was like, that's the guy from Half Nelson. And they're like, no one cares about Ryan Gosling. And then a year later, he was in whatever. I was working at Staples, and Maria Bamford came in, and I was very nice to her.
And so was somebody else?
Mark Maron also came
Mark
in, and I
Maron.
said, your show has been great. And I think he thought I meant the TV show because it was new. And I'm like, not really.
Not the scripted one.
Yeah. Marie Badford was great. And right as she was leaving, I was like, I had just seen the night before I'd seen her special where she did comedy for her parents in her house in Eagle Rock. So I was like, hey, I saw your special last time. It was really great. Because the entire time we were talking, I didn't bring up that I knew who she was. And I finally, as she was walking out the door, I was like, I'm a big fan of yours. And she stood facing the door with like 2 bags full of stuff she just bought and was like, oh, that's why you were nice to me. And then she walked out the door. One time I was in Los Feliz and I see a French bulldog come up and start peeing in front of me. I'm like, that's John Mulaney's dog. And I looked up, it was John Mulaney.
Well, the way I remember you telling you're like, hey, that's John Mulaney's dog. And you looked up, hey, that's John Mulaney's wife.
That's right.
Hey, that's John Mulaney.
And I ran away. I was dating a girl in college, you remember her, and she had a friend who did makeup for porn movies for adult actresses.
We went to dinner with her.
We did go to dinner with her, but I went to another dinner for her birthday at Casa Vega and was sitting amongst many adult actresses. I was like, I know you. But my favorite of all of these was a gas station on Hyperion. It was Hyperion and Griffith Park, whatever that is there by Marshall, and Bud Cort, who played Harold and Maude, but more importantly was Brewster McCloud, and was one of my favorite movies, was there, and we were right next to each other getting gas, and he was just all messed up because I guess he had messed up his knee and he was on medication, and he's like, I shouldn't be driving right now. But him and I were just talking, and
But Maud wanted it this way.
yeah, we were talking for a long time. We were talking about his knee and how he didn't feel good lately. Something about one of his dogs. I can't really remember, but we were talking for a long time, like maybe 5 or 6 minutes, to the point where we're like, hey, Bud Cort, I gotta go. And as I was leaving, I said to him like, hey, I don't.
Hey, Bud, want to have a catch?
I don't usually do this, but Brewster McCloud's one of my favorite movies, and you were absolutely perfect in it. And I'm just happy to meet you and see you. And he looks so touched by that, and I'm like, okay, bye now, bye forever.
All right, go back to washing cars. Well, you reminded me of a few things.
Yeah.
Well, first off, Andy Dick. I've seen Andy Dick like 4 times.
Oh, that's
everybody has seen Andy Dick.
Oh, you were at a party.
I was at a party with Andy. I was at a party with a lot of strange things happening.
Yeah, that's right.
But
you were called a lesbian by a comedian who's
another
on his way
celebrity.
up right now. Yeah.
when we were at CSUN, William Hung.
That's right. William Hung was a student. And you pushed me into a soda machine, a vending machine. Greg, hard into
It's William Hung,
Greg. That wasn't even our first time seeing him because we worked in the library. We saw him all the time.
William Hung. I also remember another thing because Kenneth Mars, who played the Nazi in The Producers and the Burgermaster or whatever in Young Frankenstein, he lived in Porter Ranch, so I would see him around Granada Hills. I would see him working out at the YMCA, and then I would see him like walking around the Granada Hills parade.
That's a good get.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
get.
And nobody cared. Nobody cared.
Yeah. I had worked for like a record company that did like psychobilly stuff, and we became friends with the drummer from the Germs, the punk band from the 80s, to the point where like, oh, Don Bowles is here, we gotta go. It became weird and annoying that Don Bowles wanted to talk to us, the drummer from the Germs, which was one of the I talked to DJ Bonebreak, was another drummer from X, which is one of my favorite bands. He's one of my favorite drummers, and I did not at one point say I have an X tattoo. The only tattoo I have is of your band.
The lifestyles of the rich and the famous.
LA.
She loves me.
If you want to see a celebrity, I think that the best places to go to see a celebrity in LA, if you're listening to this, the ArcLight or the Amoeba or any Gelsons. The two Gelsons.
Where I shop, you'll see me. But I also recommend Studio City, that like strip, like where the bookstore is, like around there, where the Barnes & Noble, that area on like a Saturday or maybe even Sunday afternoon, you're going to see somebody.
You'll see somebody.
You'll see somebody. I'll make sure.
Oh, yeah.
What a fun way to end this episode.
I know. Talking about Bud Cort.
We all knew it would end this way. From the cradle to the Bud Court. We're courting you, Bud.
Wow.
To leave us a review on iTunes.
I'm spitting up blood. That was so bad.
It was pretty good. Just leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us 5 stars with some words. It makes us more visible. It gets more people interested. Also, tell people about us. If you have friends who might like this, tell them.
This indescribable thing that we do.
This H.P. Lovecraft indescribable mess.
From the deep reaches of space.
Tell them about it.
Yeah.
You can follow us on Twitter at Ellie Meekly, like us on Facebook.
Instagram, Ellie_Meekly. That's where, please feel free
post
to
stuff every day.
Bother us. Please bother us. We like it when
people
bother us.
Send us your own listener question.
Yes,
email us ellie.meekly@gmail.com or contact us any other way. We love it.
And with field trips, we're doing more field trips. So if you have if you work at a place that you think is important, important, reach out to us and we'll go and interview you.
And we've been talking about all of my Patreon things, making jokes, rhyming, rapping.
We kid. We like to kid.
Kid. In all seriousness, for $5 a month, I will make a joke on paper for you. We will send you.
Because I can't help it because I'm compelled to.
I
cannot write a serious thing if there was a gun pointed to my head and they're like, write a serious note, I'd be like, pull the trigger because that's not going to happen.
Knock, knock, I'm dead. For $5 a month, we will send you a postcard, a handwritten postcard, and we'll send it to you. And it also, it supports that we don't make any money from this, so it supports us. It keeps us going financially, and it's very nice. You can even give less. We don't send you anything, but you can give us less. And a few people have done that. A guy from Portugal emailed us, and we like that.
Yeah, we do like that. And he says that he wants the money to go towards us buying ice cream.
Yeah.
You won't get the money because I can't have ice cream.
Tuesh Daidu.
That's pandering. That's fan service, which is suddenly a bad thing.
So yeah, well that's been our October thing.
Everybody, you got homework due.
Yeah.
You got homework due by October, let's say 23rd.
Yeah. If it's after that, sorry.
Your
words are falling on deaf ears.
You got to move out. You got to go to Riverside or Santa Clarita.
Yeah. Send it to their podcast.
Yeah.
Just a pea pod. Remember that joke?
No.
The pea pod.
Was it good?
I remember it being really funny.
I remember it going over really well with you.
I remember having to repeat it a lot of times, so that means it was funny. We'll see you then. That's been yet another episode of LA Meekly, coming out once every 4 weekly since 2013.
Don't Venmo him money. Please don't do it.
Please do.
Please
do. It's my birthday.